highs of 23 or 24. Generally the high teens to low 20s elsewhere. If you're stuck under the rain, it'd be quite a chilly feel. That rain pushes northwards and fragments as we move through the evening, and then further rain pushes in from the southwest as we move through into the early hours of Tuesday morning. Some of this rain will also be heavy. So quite a lot of cloud around means temperatures again holding up in the mid-teens to take us into Tuesday morning, which will be a bit of an unsettled start to the day. Showers and longer spells of rain, but I'm hopeful as we move through the day we will see more in the way of sunny spells developing. But again, some of the showers through the day on Tuesday could be heavy, perhaps more focused across the north and the west of the UK. And temperatures under the cloud a little disappointing for the time of year. Staying unsettled over the next few days, further showers and temperatures around average.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
The BBC has suspended the top presenter accused in the teen sex scandal as the corporation calls in the police to investigate.
Good morning. At 6 o'clock on Monday, the 10th of July, this is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Leading the news on this Monday morning, a BBC household name accused of paying a teenager for explicit pictures has been suspended, with the Metropolitan Police now looking into the claims. The corporation's Director General, Tim Davey, confirmed that the star was dropped after new allegations came to light.
President Joe Biden has refused to back Ukraine's membership of NATO in a snub to Rishi Sunak ahead of talks between the two today. Biden will also meet with the King in Windsor, where the pair will discuss climate change initiatives.
A second girl has died following the Wimbledon school car crash. Police said Nuria Sajid died of her injuries, with her family describing her as the light of their lives.
England have reignited the Ashes with a tense victory over Australia in the third test. Paul Coyte will be here with all the latest sports news from Headingley, Wimbledon and from Silverstone.
Yes, I do. And I tell you, I told you they win. I tell you they win. Another 9 days, though, until the next test. We've got to wait until that at Old Trafford. We've got the tennis and also, surprise, surprise, Max Verstappen wins the British Grand Prix.
Thank you, Paul. And after a weekend that saw flooding in parts of the country, what's in store for the week ahead?
We saw lots of showers and thunderstorms over the weekend. Will there be more this week? We'll find out in the latest weather forecast with me coming up soon.
Well, our top story this morning is that the BBC has now suspended one of its male TV presenters accused of paying a teenager £35,000 for sexually explicit images.
The state broadcaster is now facing questions over its handling of the issue after it confirmed that it first received a complaint in May.
Police officers will meet with the corporation today about the incident, but said they had not yet received a formal allegation.
Well, let's speak first to Rebecca Ryan, who is campaign director at Defund the BBC. Good morning to you. Criticisms of the way the management have handled this will add weight to people like you who are opposed to the BBC.
Absolutely. I mean, the thing is, we're not opposed to the BBC strictly. The thing is, we don't want it to be publicly funded, to be forced to be funded by people who are reluctant to pay for it just for watching a live broadcast TV. So, yeah, the thing is, the BBC lurches from one sex scandal to another and is shown to be incapable of, actually dealing with these kinds of issues in a timely, appropriate manner. As you've just said there, they have sat on this allegation for over 7 weeks now, and it's only when pressure was brought to bear by the mother of this person, by going to the Sun newspaper, that the BBC has actually then swung into action. And what action has it actually taken? It then took a further day for them to actually suspend the presenter. So that, this is it's not an acceptable way to run a publicly funded organisation. So what we would say is, let's get rid of the licence fee, let the BBC stand on its own feet, let it be answerable to people who willingly pay for it, and then we'll start to see them behaving in a more appropriate way. But this is just completely unacceptable.
What should be done next, Rebecca?
Well, they need to say who the presenter is, first and foremost, because at the moment the light is people are sort of wondering who it is, and therefore this sort of negative viewpoint is being cast on all the male presenters at the BBC. So I would have thought they would all be looking for the name to be released and for a full disclosure of what's happened and full transparency, because what we see from the BBC is that they try and brush everything under the carpet. And then they spend years sort of hoping that it goes away, and then they do their own internal reviews, and then they whitewash it. And that's simply not acceptable anymore. We've seen it enough times, and the public aren't prepared to keep paying for this.
I suppose the fact remains we don't actually know what the nature of the complaint was back in May. Obviously, once we know more about that, that will change, perhaps our perspective on how swiftly they've responded to this. The Culture Secretary says that she's been given assurances they are dealing with this swiftly. I suppose the big question now is, as you say, whether they name the star or whether or not actually he has a right to privacy, given that he has a private life, no criminal charges have been brought yet. This didn't happen on BBC Property or on BBC Time. Just because the public are interested, I suppose they have to weigh that up, don't they? Public interest versus privacy.
Indeed, but they have had 7 weeks, and I think the thing is, what they need to have done in that time frame is to have looked at what the allegations were, and if it is something that is fairly straightforward, if it's something, let's just speculate and say that it's through OnlyFans or whatever, and therefore the person in question has lied about their age or whatever. Let's investigate these things, turn it around quickly, and then we would have some answers, and then we can have a debate about what that means and whether a big name BBC presenter should be using OnlyFans. You know, let's have the open debate, because this is an organisation that's paid for currently by the British taxpayer. It is a tax. For watching any live TV. And I think that's, so they need to be open and honest, and they have had the time to look at the report and let's have the debate about it.
OK, Rebecca, thank you very much indeed for opening up that debate. Also joining us in the studio, Lucy Berriford. Lucy is a psychotherapist. Lucy, it's a pretty open secret in the business as to who this person is. And it's only a matter of time, I'm sure, before they are named. But what is this? Is this story everything it seems to be on the face of it? Or what would you say the story is really about?
Well, most people assume that because it deals with sexual images that this is a sexual scandal. But actually, it's a scandal about different things. It's about power. It's about the way in which someone controls how another person behaves. And that can often come because they themselves have reached an elevated position, maybe in their career or in society, or maybe in certain societies because of their gender. So there's a lot of power here, particularly around age. Who is the older person here? Then there's also an element of control. You can be in a relationship and have power, but not have control. But in this particular scenario, it would seem, from what we know, that this person is saying, this is my contract, I'm going to give you money, and you're going to give me something in return. And that can be a huge aphrodisiac, it can be a huge turn-on for people in that situation, and that can drive it. But there's a third element here, which is purely around biology, in terms of the traits that you might have in your personality and your biological drives that get you to become someone very successful, someone very driven, very ambitious. Let's face it, someone who might be prepared to take lots of risks to get to where they want to be. That can sometimes end up being the seed of your downfall, because you take one risk too many and you end up where perhaps we are today.
I suppose, you know, given that this presenter had, you know, as a face of BBC, there will be lots of staff in the organisation who will possibly feel aggrieved if they are seen to be given any sort of special treatment. But that plays into all of this, doesn't it? Because a lot of these stars are indulged for long periods of time and become sort of above the rules in many ways.
They do end up perhaps feeling very entitled, not just in this particular situation, but in many sex scandal cases. What you often find is that the person who's been in power just ends up thinking that the normal rules don't apply to them. However, there is another element that I want to highlight, which is this risk-taking. And what you often find is that underneath all of this is some very perverse sense of, I hope I get found out. I'm not actually really enjoying this. I don't like the subterfuge. I don't like the amount of mental energy that this is taking up. Sometimes we might even put it in the category of sex addiction. This might be slightly different because it is possible that there might be an OnlyFans connection, in which case it might just be about titillation or even money, dare one say it. But in terms of that risk-taking, some people in high-profile situations are almost longing to be exposed. They're almost longing to have that situation where someone says, you're not really meant to be doing that, and it must all stop. Of course, that's quite a childlike perspective. I hope I'm found out, and then I will have my low-grade punishment, and then I can get on with my life. But in a situation like this, the punishment could be incredibly severe.
Well, the punishment, I would imagine, whether it's official or not, is career-ending, I would think, in this particular case. But what you're describing there, would the individual, would the perpetrator be conscious of what they're wishing for, or what may come about?
I really like the way you asked that. That isn't necessarily what's happening on a conscious level. There's a drive, there's a need for something more exciting in their lives, or to feel again that sense of control, that power, maybe new opportunities. But actually at the same time, there's a deeper, perhaps a wound that hasn't been addressed, that you feel that somehow you have been perhaps slighted in some way, or you haven't had the success that you really want, and that actually you're so being driven to get some other needs met. As I say, it could be about power, could be about control, could be about human connection, but at a very detached level. The realms of the human psyche are such that even though sometimes we long for connection, we actually also rebuff it and resist it as well. So our connections can be very, very mangled. And this too might be a situation where someone is longing for something. They don't quite consciously understand what it is, so they seek out those connections in slightly warped ways.
Fascinating. Thank you very much indeed for the insight, Lucy. Different way of looking at such things. Lucy is a top psychotherapist. They're analysing the motives behind this face off the BBC, who's now been suspended for a moment. Thank you very much indeed. Your views very, very welcome. GBNews at gbviews.com. Get in touch with us throughout the programme today. Let us know what you think, where this story should go next.
In other news, the US President touched down in the UK last night, and this morning he will meet with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak ahead of the NATO summit in Lithuania tomorrow.
So the talks follow Joe Biden's comments that Ukraine's not ready to join NATO. It's seen by many as a snub to our Prime Minister, who has backed their bid.
There are also tensions over Biden's decision to send cluster bombs to Ukraine, despite use of the bombs being banned by 123 countries, including the UK, because of their impact, very often in civilians, after wars have ended.
Here in the studio to discuss is the former advisor to Boris Johnson, Alex Crowley. Alex, good morning to you.
Good morning.
What way do you see this going today?
Well, usually when a US president comes over for a visit like this, it's an opportunity for the Prime Minister of the day to get away from their domestic concerns and have a bit of stardust on the international stage. The problem is that this US president likes to make a point of coming over to this country and usually makes his opposition or displeasure with us clear in some way. This time it's his reluctance over NATO membership and cluster bombs. Of course, previously it was Northern Ireland. So the expectations, I think, for this visit will be quite low, because there aren't that many areas of agreement. Of course, usually Ukraine is quite a safe space for agreement between the UK and US. But as we've seen, some of these particular tensions have emerged.
Yes, and, you know, aside from the Biden visit, which we'll talk about again in a minute, but just to talk about some of those tensions, what's going to be happening in Vilnius tomorrow with this NATO meeting is, for the first time, a bit of disagreement between the West, frankly, in relation to... And Russia will be licking their lips about this, and that's effectively because of Biden's decision to provide cluster bombs to Ukraine.
Yes, exactly. Russia definitely want cracks between the allies because that is their best chance of emerging victorious in their war aims. It's a slightly odd disagreement. Yes, of course, cluster bombs are banned by the 123 countries, but let's be honest here. This is a war, OK? The cluster bombs are used regularly by both Ukraine and Russia in it is a vicious fight that's a little bit like the First World War. You've got trenches, you've got entrenched positions, you've got a very long front line. And I think that what Ukraine have said is, look, we need these, OK? We need this for our very survival. And the Americans have agreed with them on that. And it's a little bit rich for some of the other Western countries to say, well, we want to support Ukraine, but there are some things that we like and some things that we don't. The Ukrainians really aren't bothered about those sorts of things. They have a fight for their survival.
There was a bit of a snub to the royal family from President Biden as well when he didn't attend the coronation. We're meeting the King for the first time in his capacity as our monarch. They'll be having tea at Windsor, but perhaps they'll find some common ground discussing climate issues.
Yes, actually, I think this is probably going to be a more successful visit for the King than it will be for the Prime Minister. It seems as if they have a lot to talk about on the green agenda. We are told, or we hear, that the invite, of course, was originally extended by the King, and the President accepted it on that basis. So, you know, it's always a positive thing for any US president to get their little time with the monarch. It's important for the King as well, because, of course, previously everyone wanted to come and see the Queen, and now he wants to get back into that position of world leaders wanting to get their moment at Windsor or at Buckingham Palace and to have that little bit of royal shine.
Rolling out the red carpet. Good stuff. Thank you very much indeed, Alex.
Thank you.
The time is 6:15. Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories. and a second child has died following the Wimbledon car crash on Thursday. She's been named as 8-year-old Nuria Sajid. Her family has paid tribute to her, saying she was the light of their lives and embodied joy, kindness and generosity. The driver of the vehicle, a 46-year-old woman, has been bailed until late July.
Ministers say significant progress has been made in ensuring better support for rape victims, but campaigners say the government's been too quick to claim tangible improvements. Both the Home Office and the Ministry of Justice said a progress report shows the government's restored both the number of police referrals and cases reaching court to 2016 levels.
The mother of Stephen Lawrence has told the Home Secretary she remains profoundly concerned about the slow pace of reforms regarding serving police officers who commit serious crimes. Baroness Doreen Lawrence said existing police misconduct processes do not command the public's confidence, saying their application can be inconsistent and confusing.
It's been a funny old few days of weather.
A funny old
few days.
Off and on.
Yeah. I went to the fair where I live at the weekend.
Yeah.
And we had to endure 6 hours of umbrellas and ponchos and flip-flops and wet grass.
Yeah.
It wasn't really the July day we were banking on.
It was darkish and showers were coming in and out, and then, you know, it would go for long periods. It looked as if it was going to rain, and it didn't rain.
It was so hot, though, despite all the water and the rain and everything.
Steamy.
So muggy all day.
Being in a sauna.
But that wasn't the worst of it.
I don't like saunas.
No, a bit much,
Take
aren't
my
they?
breath away.
There's a song there, don't. But actually, that was probably the best of the weather. In some places, lots of flooding. Let's take a look, though, what the weather's going to get up to today.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GBNews.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. We saw lots of showers over the weekend. There will be more to come today. In fact, some longer spells of rain too, and feeling quite fresh. And that's the picture for the next few days as well. Low pressure in charge of our weather, bringing showers and longer spells of rain. It doesn't go anywhere quickly for much of this week, really, keeping it fairly unsettled and cool. And yes, there is some sunshine first thing this morning, particularly across the north and the east, but towards the southwest we've got gathering clouds and outbreaks of rain. This is slowly going to push north and eastwards as we go through the day. Some of this rain could be heavy at times for parts of Wales into the Midlands, northwestern parts of England later as well. Elsewhere will generally be a case of sunshine and showers, and some of them will be heavy at times, possibly thundery too. Best of the sunshine towards the southeast, where we'll see highs approaching the mid-20s, feeling quite chilly under the cloud and rain. Into this evening, that rain pushes northwards and fragments into showers, but then towards the southwest we see further rain pushing into southern counties of England and Wales as we move overnight. Some of this will be heavy as well, and you can see further showers across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England too. So this will keep temperatures up, generally between 14 and 17 Celsius to take us into Tuesday morning. So it's a bit of an unsettled start. We have rain clearing eastwards across England and Wales, showers elsewhere, some of these heavy at times for parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, and then later on Northern England too. Some rumbles of thunder possible. A few glimmers of sunshine in between the showers, and feeling quite fresh, particularly around the west where it will be quite breezy. Temperatures in the high teens to low 20s across the UK, which is a little below average, particularly where we do have that strength of wind. Over the next few days it does stay unsettled, further showers, longer spells of rain, and temperatures generally on the cool side, reaching the low 20s at best towards the south and east.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GBNews.
Just going through your comments, the things that have got you talking so far today, the BBC presenter and their suspension. Pete says this latest scandal will permanently destroy the integrity that the BBC holds so highly. This could be the beginning of the end with everything else that has gone on.
Yes, and Ukraine. Paul says, I can't believe Sunak condemning the US for supplying Ukraine with cluster munitions to assist with the war. He states because the conventions, but does Putin abide by the convention? No, he kills innocent people on a daily basis and bombards the country with missiles.
Just back to the BBC again, Kitty saying, do we believe that this is just a one-off offence? Would naming the presenter encourage any other potential victims victims to come forward. I'm struggling to believe this is a first offence, as it's a pretty serious one. Of course, we're across that throughout the morning. We'll bring you any developments as they happen.
Stay with us. England have rekindled their Ashes hopes after a nail-biting victory over Australia in the third test. Paul Coit will be here with all the big sports stories, and there's lots of it around. Welcome back.
Yeah, very welcome back. In about half an hour's time, no, actually, it's 20 minutes' time, we're going to be asking what the government thinks needs to be done to restore faith in the BBC. And believe me, since we don't know too much yet, that faith is about to be shattered even further, I would have thought.
At 7:20, amid concerns British students are losing out to foreign applicants for university places, we'll ask if people from the UK should be prioritised when it comes to higher education.
That's just a money-making racket, that is. Let's just take your dosh wherever you're from. We'll take your money, and because they need the money to develop the universities. Over British students, get in touch all the usual ways.
Yeah, no, don't worry. We'll get into it later on, that debate. I was giving my tuppence worth, but I'll save it.
Give us your tuppence, go on.
Well, I was just saying it's not, you know, it's to be honest, it's the kids in the middle that are getting squeezed. So you've got the foreign students with loads of money coming in, which obviously, because of inflation, the universities need, and then you've got loads of subsidised places and support for and access and all the rest of it for people from deprived backgrounds or poorer backgrounds. But kids in the middle are having nowhere to go, can't get places, many of them going overseas. It's like a bit of a brain drain as well of our own, which is a shame.
Yeah, GBNews, GBNews.com, or tweet at GBNews. I mean, that brain drain has been around for a long time. It's just getting worse and worse. I mean, for instance, in Northern Ireland, we have a highly educated populace, which we just educate for export. We educate them to work in England. We educate them to work in other places around the world, America, Australia, whatever. And it's just sad to see, very highly educated, but no jobs for them at home.
But yeah, now not even getting educated here because they can't get in because so many foreign students coming in. Let us know your thoughts.
Back pages, they shape up like this on this Monday morning. Back from the dread, says the Express. England's cricketers battled back from the brink to beat Australia 3 wickets in the third test. And now we can win the Ashes, says the Telegraph. Ben Stokes believes England are on the stroke of an epic comeback, and you might even call it a Lando hope and glory. If you're the Mirror, British racing driver Lando Norris became second in the British Grand Prix at Silverstone yesterday. What sort of name is Lando? Was Lando his full name?
I've never known a Lando before.
You what?
I've never known a Lando.
Oh.
I never went to school.
Is it a nickname?
No, Lando. Landerman or something. I don't know. Sure.
Anyway, well done to him.
Well
anyway, good morning, Paul Coit.
Morning.
Where do you want to begin?
We better start with the cricket, I think.
Yeah.
Cricket's, I hate to say, and I said earlier, I have a feeling that even when we went 2 down, there's still a chance that we can still win the Ashes. 3 games to go, then the game at Headingley, so tight. Everyone has been incredibly tight.
Yeah.
So we go 2-0 down, and Headingley has been the scene of some great Ashes matches in the past. Ian Botham in 81, and then we had Ben Stokes in 2019. Local boy Harry Brook played really well, and it was just another fantastic game. Went down to the wire, won by 3 wickets. So we move on now. So we're 9 days away from the next test. So there is a very good chance.
Where's that one?
That is at Old Trafford. Right. So Old Trafford, and then the last one is going to be the Oval.
Okay, so it has to go to 2-2, and then it could all be dependent.
Has to be, yeah.
The Oval.
And a draw is no good because Australia already have the Ashes, but we need to win. So we need to win both. Okay. And there's no reason why not.
Well, that's set up well.
Yeah, it's really...
The Formula One at Silverstone, then.
Yeah, not really a surprise. Max Verstappen then cruised to victory again. So it's 8 wins out of 10. It's 11 on the trot for Red Bull. It wasn't the greatest race, but again, I mean, we can just expect it. I think the best part for me was the national anthem. I don't know whether you saw. Did you see the national anthem?
No.
Which was it was the actor. Can you believe that his name's gone out of my head? Damien Lewis, who did this kind of jazzy, strange version of the national anthem with a saxophonist.
Oh right,
Trust me,
great.
it is worth seeing.
Sounds up my street.
But he
love
did
Damien
it.
Lewis,
It was almost like. I'd love to know what you think of it because it was. He kind of did it like this, and it was the most bizarre situation.
He was a singer.
Well, I don't know whether he does either, to be honest with you. I don't know whether he does. He's got an album out, and now he's he plays guitar and sings, but it was very strange.
Do you know what my favourite part of the Grand Prix was?
What was what?
The Brad Pitt stop.
Oh, of course.
He's filming. They had all of them filming for his latest movie at the same time as all the security for Just Stop Oil. You've got all of these guys in there as well. And, gosh, he's never looked better, has he?
Apex. What is he, 59?
Yes.
59 now? And the thing, I was talking about this on Friday, so the thing is that they're shrouding it in secrecy, this new Formula One film that Brad Pitt's being in. And so they're doing the filming there, and he's driving the Mercedes, which is adapted, so it's not too fast for him. So they filmed it, and then they're going to add it to the race, so it all looks... I mean, it will look amazing on screen.
But he's been getting a bit of heat for being a bit too old to be playing this role, even though it is about an ageing F1 driver. 59 is pretty old for that.
But if we said to you he was 36, you'd believe me in that.
He's never looked better, honestly.
He looks well.
Surgery's amazing what they do in Hollywood these days, isn't it? But the thing is, you know what the film's going to be about. You kind of work out what the film's going to be about. You know, he's an ageing driver, so what's the story? You know, he comes back after he hasn't raced in probably 25 years because his best friend was probably killed in a race, you know, and he's got his kid who's looked up to him and said, Dad, you know, you're just a drunk these days. I need you to win things. And so he turns his life around. This is what I kind of imagine it's going to be.
Sounds great.
It sounds great, doesn't it? You're in already. But anyway, it's called Apex, so they filmed there. But the actual race itself, I mean, the most exciting thing was the double home podium, which is the first time it's happened since the 90s. Lando, our friend Lando from McLaren was second. Lewis Hamilton, looking better now. This Mercedes car is looking better as well. So third for him. Great. But great to have 2 home drivers on the podium, but it was obvious again that Max Verstappen was
Right, we'll look at Wimbledon over the weekend. Isabel, how was your experience on Friday?
Oh, I had a fabulous day on Friday. We just had so many big names on centre court that we actually couldn't tear ourselves away, and we ended up watching about 8 or 9 hours of tennis. Such
Long time.
high-level tennis, though. Wawrinka versus Djokovic, the rallies were incredible. But Djokovic had a bit of a sort of Murray situation last night, playing right up until the curfew. And, you know, I think it really didn't serve Andy Murray well at all, obviously.
No, I don't.
But Djokovic, I mean, he can take it all, can't he?
He can. I mean, I was looking at Andy Murray and thinking about how that was going to end, because I caught the end of it and you saw the start of it the next day.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, if you're 36 years old, do you need the rest? Is it good? But then the way it was going, obviously it was going well for him, and he'd gone 2 sets to 1 up, so it didn't work in that way. Djokovic, like you say, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Whatever happens with Djokovic. I still think it's... I'm thinking the final... I mean, he beat... He's 2 sets up against Hubert Hurkacz from Poland. Carlos Alcaraz
who
plays
I also
today.
was lucky enough to see on Friday. And I have to say, and I was chatting to some sort of Tennessee people on Friday who were saying he's really probably not the world -- 1, even though he is seeded, because Djokovic lost his seeding very much through all of the vaccine, not being able to participate in lots of tournaments. But it will be interesting to see whether or not he is going to be the new one to watch, really, or whether... And everyone seemed to think the money seemed to be on Djokovic probably winning Wimbledon.
Yeah, I mean, he's the world #1. But I still think Djokovic... It's a Djokovic-Alcaraz final. This is what everybody's talking about. Well, they built Nicolas Jarry yesterday of Chile. Did you see what Jarry did after the game? You know, when you get players walk out and then you get the big tennis balls, they'll either sign a tennis ball or they'll hand over their wristbands. He actually handed out tennis rackets yesterday, seriously.
Nice.
Which I thought was a lovely gesture.
That's such a good idea.
So as he's walking out, there's kids there, and he's opened up the bag, because, I mean, let's face it, how many rackets are they going to be given? And he went like that. He handed out a racket to one kid, handed a racket out to another kid, and handed out 3 rackets. The whole of the centre court applauded, because it's never been seen before, which I thought was a lovely gesture.
The new normal. That would be so good if that became his thing.
I think it's great. Yeah. By the way, I picked up a new tennis racket, by saying old... A new old tennis racket. When I was a kid, there was a tennis racket that I always wanted, which was a Wilson Jack Kramer autograph. And I remember it was always advertised in tennis magazines, because I really got into tennis for a while. And so I saw one on eBay. So I don't know. I think we've got a picture of the. I tell you, it's a beauty. Look at that.
It's lovely.
It's a beauty, isn't it?
On your kitchen wall or something.
Well, this is what I'm thinking of doing.
Lovely.
I don't know whether to actually go round to my local courts and use it. But a Jack Kramer autograph, I mean, original...
What did you pay for that?
40 quid.
Brilliant.
Yeah. It's not bad, is it?
I think it's more of a decoration, though, than an actual tennis racket.
I think so, yeah. but it's an absolute beauty. So
and did that give you a tingle, holding that in your hand?
You know what? Yes, it did.
Yeah?
It did, because it was one of those things I've always wanted. I've done it before, something I've always wanted. Have you done that where with something you always wanted as a kid?
Yeah.
And then thought... Now I'm older, and it's probably like really cheap. I'm going to... Have you not? You've grown out of that.
Always wanted a chopper bike.
Yeah? Did you never get one?
No.
You know, they're making those again.
I don't think I'd fit.
You did. Maybe you could just so you can own one.
I always wanted a Captain Scarlet outfit as well.
You know what? I wanted one of those too.
And it was 27.
27.
I always wanted it.
Someone get Eamonn a captain.
You know what? When I was a kid, we played. This is. I've got. You know, you have memories and think. Obviously, I'm learning a lot about me and my all problems as being a child.
Yeah.
But we played Captain Scarlet, and there was one kid was Captain Scarlet. The other kid was... I was Captain Ochre.
Yeah.
Captain Ochre was in Captain Scarlet for 5 minutes in the entire set. That's all I was. Never got to be Captain Scarlet.
Oh.
This is the voice of the Mr. Arms.
That's right.
We know you can hear us, Earthmen.
You know what? It's giving me chills
now. We have the power
now.
to destroy you.
Black circles will just then go across us.
You see, my producers in my head has no appreciation of what we're talking about. It just keeps saying, got to rap here, because he's no culture in him.
No culture. Francis Matthews was the voice of Captain Scarlet, by the way. Remember Francis Matthews? Carlos Alcaraz plays Matteo Berrettini next. Berrettini, I have a very strange feeling, will put up a hell of a fight.
OK.
He's been terrific and could well win.
Mark Cavendish, I felt sorry for in the Tour de France yesterday, falling off his bike and smashing his collarbone.
Yeah.
But there we go. 5-time Tour winner, equal with Eddie Merckx.
That's
34
right.
stage wins. So that was that.
Not on a chopper either, by the way.
Okay, not on a chopper either. Paul, for the moment, thank you very much. Are we seeing you again later?
I believe so.
Okay, thank you very much indeed.
Right, stay with us as the BBC have suspended a presenter over alleged sexual pic shame. We'll be going through the papers with Chris Akabusi and Claire Pearsall.
Here are your front pages. This is the way they look on this Monday morning.
The Sun's leading with BBC Star's sex pic shame as a suspended presenter made panic calls to a youngster, they allege.
Guardian says MPs, including ex-Prime Minister Theresa May, hold secret shares in companies, raising questions of a potential conflict of interest.
In The Times, England kept their Ashes hopes alive after a thrilling third test at Headingley, taking the series back to 2-1.
And in The Telegraph, Hollywood actor Brad Pitt fooled fans into thinking he was driving at the British Grand Prix as he was seen filming yesterday at Silverstone.
And joining us to go through the papers this morning in more detail is the Olympian Chris Akabusi and the former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall. Very warm welcome to both of you. And Claire, you want to start with the Sun newspaper, who, as we know, broke this big story over the weekend about a BBC presenter, and they have new allegations this morning on their front page.
Well, that's right. It is alleged that the individual has made a phone call to the young person involved in all of this, begging them not to continue with any action or with the police investigation. So it's becoming ever more murky and ever more desperate. But it does beg the question why the police were not involved when the allegation was made as far back as May. I'm not quite sure the BBC are handling it well. Let's start from that premise. And it's going to be an unholy mess. Unfortunately, speculation as to the identification of the individual is rife over the internet, and the BBC are now playing catch-up, which is a really dangerous place for them to be. The damage this is going to do to that organisation, but also now the families involved in this, the individual accused that family, the youngster involved, that family. This is now taking on a life of its own. Unless the BBC deal quickly and efficiently with this, it is just going to roll out across the week and be a real uncomfortable mess for a lot of people.
I'm not sure exactly why the presenter hasn't been named yet. I'm not sure whose purpose that serves, because sure as heck that name will be out in the next couple of days. I mean, they're only just prolonging the inevitable on this.
I think they are. I do think we have to be careful when allegations are made. We have seen too many people accused of things who have then been proven to be innocent, but their name has been dragged through the mud. So that's sort of one side, and I feel that it's incumbent upon us all to be a little bit careful. But now this has gone to the police. I think the BBC are going to have to make that decision. The police need to act quickly and see if there are these allegations stack up, see if there is enough evidence. And I think at that point, the BBC will be forced to name the person involved. But it is particularly difficult because it's bringing other people's names into it, because the speculation is rife as to who the public haven't seen on their television screens for some days. And people are being named and being said that they are guilty, which I think is incredibly unfair on them.
Don't you think there are two stories almost? One story being the defamation being put out on a lot of social media platforms. And, you know, should somebody's privacy, as the BBC at the moment are protecting this particular person's privacy, should that be infringed because the social media platforms aren't doing enough to stop other people being wrongly identified? Because there are questions, you know, there's a big debate. I mean, as Eamonn says, he thinks the person should be named. But there are legitimate questions until we know whether, A, the allegations are true, when exactly they came to light, where they took place, whether or not money changed hands, whether there's been any criminality. Actually, he does have a right, or this person has a right to private life.
You're definitely right, definitely. I mean, look, they're going through the protocols and the processes, and we can all remember Sir Cliff, who got falsely accused. The BBC went to town, so maybe the BBC, in the light of that experience, have tightened up on the protocols to make sure that they don't have another unsavoury story like that. One of the questions that were in my mind is why Mum didn't go to the police right at the very beginning in May.
Absolutely interesting point, that, and why the BBC have become this kind of intermediary between the alleged perpetrator and the victim. Surely they should have gone straight to the police if they felt it was criminal.
Well, if it was my child, I would have gone to the police straight away and say, look, you know, I've got a challenge. Here's a problem. I mean, the BBC would have been an irrelevance, because it's actually me, my child, and the presenter. That's actually the real story. The fact that he works at the BBC obviously is very important, but I would have had, you know, gone to the police about that. So, you know, I do believe that the chap deserves privacy until it's proven guilty. Yeah, and then, of course, and look, it's a process of elimination. We'll all be looking at our TV screens. Whoever doesn't turn up for work in the next couple of days, we know it's you.
And the Sun newspaper has an obvious direct relationship with the family involved, so they know everything that is going on, and they believe that they have the presenter banged to rights on this one. There's no getting out of it.
Well, they quite clearly, but yet they themselves has also not named the person. So somebody in their legal team is saying, be careful too. So there are obviously I's to be dotted and T's to be crossed before the name can be put out there. So, you know, over the last 20, 30 years, we've got this breaking news, and we want to be ahead of the curve. But maybe, look, we should wait until everything is sorted out before we actually get involved in this story at that level.
Claire, where do you want to go to next? It's up to you.
Oh, shall we have a look at the Rwanda boats?
Yes, this is very interesting from Ken Clark.
It is a really interesting point. So the bill, the illegal migration bill, which is currently making its way through the political processes in the House of Lords, where there were a series of defeats made last week, which are now coming back into the House of Commons. But Lord Clark, Ken Clark, former big beast of the Conservative Party, has made what I think is quite a stunning intervention on this. He believes that this bill will stop the small boats. Now, I find it quite interesting that he has chosen this moment to come out in favour when the Lords has put at least 20 defeats against the House of Commons piece of legislation. And it just seems an odd one for him to get involved in. We know him for his economic prowess, but not necessarily for his immigration knowledge. So I find myself disagreeing with Ken Clarke, which is unfortunate because he is one of my sort of political heroes. But it is quite interesting that people are starting to speak up on either side. And it's nice to get the feeling that the Lords aren't just acting as a group. There are individuals involved, which is not just the bishops and the Archbishop of Canterbury, as we've seen, but some proper legal and political minds are now starting to speak out on whichever side of the debate. So it doesn't matter which side you fall on. There are voices coming through, so I believe this is a much better way of looking through a piece of legislation and getting a balanced view than people just shouting at each other, which is unfortunately what we've seen so far.
Chris, front page of The Guardian, MPs holding shares or stakes in top UK firms. What is the problem?
Yeah, actually, and when you open up the inside pages, there's 3 or 4 pages more on this issue. And the basic problem, clearly, is conflicts of interest. That the public are in the dark of what shares our MPs have got. And it's, there's a threshold, there's a £70,000 threshold, where family members or the MP can have shares in companies. But clearly there's a conflict of interest if I'm standing up and I'm making legislation, I'm speaking against agitation for example, energy crisis. Are we going to add a superannuated tax upon the energy companies? And I've got money inside there. I don't want to be taxed because shareholder value. I want to actually, make my shares work for me. There's obviously a conflict of interest, and there's an unconscious bias. Even if I don't take the if I don't take the enlightened self-interest, there's an unconscious bias. If I'm there and I'm talking, I know that unconsciously I know that I've got shares in there. Would I actually legislate against my own interests? So I think this is the challenge that The Guardian have highlighted.
I think there's a real difference, though, between buying a lot of shares in a company because you wish to invest in that. And like the majority of people throughout the country will have a handful of shares in different companies for very different reasons, whether they have bought them as a child. I know that there are some that my family has bought for my son for when he gets older, but he hasn't chosen that, but they will be his. Yeah. And I think that there's a real difference, as I say, between loading hundreds of thousands, millions of pounds into a company and buying their shares, to holding a few that perhaps you've been given by your bank or your building society over the years, or
your financial advisor manages that on your behalf.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's obviously a weak defence, but many people will hand those kinds of decisions over, especially if they're very busy in a high-profile position. Not that it forgives it necessarily.
But it's up to 70 grand. So you can have a 70 grand in banks, energy suppliers, and supermarkets. And you can most definitely, like supermarkets. But apparently recently, the supermarket bosses were hauled in to see Mr. Sunak. Well, they sued up Mr. Sunak. I mean, there is an interest. There is something here that's not quite right. At least we should know about it. It's OK. Yeah. At least we should know about it.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, and I think that you need to be able to have transparency. So just register them, even if it is only a handful. But I do think there is a big difference. So I think we need to be careful at putting everybody into one category and saying they're all out for themselves and it will bias the legislation and that process, because I don't think it will in the majority of cases. But let's have it as a transparent process, as you say, and let's know who's got shares in which company, and it makes life a lot easier.
And The Guardian was saying it was very, very hard work for them to actually get underneath the skin of this, and actually should be made easy. You should be able to see a register and see who's got what, and OK, we're all in the open. There's nothing to worry about.
Now, I would like Chris Sakabusi to be totally transparent about the clothing that he's wearing today, particularly the jacket. Now, people can't see, but you've got a breast pocket badge there.
This is the original.
Stand up.
Oh, so.
There we go.
There we go. 1984 original. It's inspired. The UK Championships were on this weekend, and I saw all these young athletes competing, getting to the World Championships in 6 weeks' time. And I thought, can I still get in this morning? Can I still get into?
Of course you can.
I feel a little bit like Billy Bunter, but I made it. I'm in there, and I'm feeling good.
You look like you're off to Henley. Yes.
So the year was 1984.
This is 1984.
Los Angeles was the venue for the...
So, hang on. That's my silver medal.
Honestly, I really did grow up totally in awe of you.
Oh,
and
bless
I
you.
really worshipped all of the Olympians.
Stephen Redgrave wouldn't be seen dead with one of those.
Wow.
And what was
that was my very first medal in the relay, 1984. Phil Brown, Todd Bennett, Gary Cook. We got an unexpected silver. It was just a massive day in my life.
I wasn't expecting that.
I've carried that in my pocket for 39 years.
Is that always in your pocket?
It's always in my pocket.
Chris.
39 years.
But my friend, I thought that came on a ribbon.
Yes, so but obviously 39 years in my pocket, it's been bent and broken off. So I've got the ribbon at home. I just carry that.
Oh, I need a photograph after this.
Bless you, bless
hang around
you.
and do a little picky, but
Thank you very much.
Lovely story.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So I decided to crack it out.
Very good.
Climb into it.
My clothes from 1984. Nope, don't think we'll go there with that one. We can now cross live. Thanks, guys. Guys going to be back in about 40 minutes' time. To Lord Chancellor and Secretary of State for Justice, Alex Chalk, joins us now from Westminster. Very, very good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for your time today. And top of your agenda today is what?
Well, top of the agenda is I'm pleased to be able to announce that there's been some really significant progress in respect of stretching targets which we made 2 years ago to improve the number of cases being prosecuted for rape in the Crown Court. So 2 years ago, we said we wanted to increase the number of cases to get up to 2016 levels. And in terms of the number of cases that have been passed from the police to the CPS for charge, that's up by 120%. The number of charges themselves up by 90%. And the number of cases coming for the Crown Court is up by 160%. And I'm announcing today that we are taking some ambitious new steps, including rolling out a national operating model in terms of how the police and the CPS work together, an increased number of police investigators in respect of rape and serious sexual offences. So whilst, of course, the job isn't done, there has been some really significant progress, and that's what I wanted to update you on today.
Well, thank you very much for highlighting that. And I know some charities and some campaigners say the government will be quick to claim tangible improvements, but certainly any improvements in this area I'm sure people will welcome. But I want to ask you about our top story, the lead story this morning about the BBC. What do you think of their response to this scandal? Some people have described it as derisory.
Well, I think the first thing to say, these are really serious and really concerning allegations, and they need to be investigated quickly. Now, in the fullness of time, maybe there will be a consideration as to how this was dealt with. I think the important thing now, however, is that these matters are investigated, whether that's within the BBC, but also potentially by the police, if indeed that's what the police decide to do. So there's a meeting today, as I understand it. I think we now need to give them the space for that to take place. So I think we don't want to be giving a running commentary at this stage. As I say, in the fullness of time, no doubt there'll need to be a consideration about how this has all been handled. But right now, they should have the time and the space to investigate these serious and concerning matters.
Are you satisfied that the online safety bill would go far enough to protect a number of other stars who appear on the BBC, many of whom have been defamed over the weekend, being linked to this? Is enough being done to put pressure on social media companies to make sure that they're not using these platforms to ruin people's reputations?
Well, I think you make a really, really important point. I mean, the first thing is defamation online is the same as defamation offline. In other words, if you untruthfully destroy someone's reputation online, then you can be susceptible to legal action. And that's absolutely as it should be. And incidentally, that's precisely how people have achieved redress in the past. So far as the online safety bill is concerned, we are absolutely clear that where there are things that are put online, it's not just defamatory material, but it could be harmful material, that there is a duty on social media companies to take that down, and if they don't, there can be consequences for it, which can include a very significant fine. So, look, I think it's important to note that there are already existing arrangements in place to ensure that defamation, wherever it takes place, can be the subject of litigation.
Lord Chancellor, what do you think the Prime Minister will be saying to the US President Joe Biden when he meets him today? We've got issues about NATO membership for Ukraine, which are going to be discussed later in the week, which Britain seems supportive of, US not supportive of, and this idea of America supplying cluster bombs to the Ukrainian army.
Well, look, plainly there's going to be an awful lot to discuss, but I think we want to get a few things absolutely clear. The relationship between the Prime Minister and President Biden is very strong. This is the 5th meeting, face-to-face meeting they're having in as many months. And also, you know, the support that has existed between the UK and the US, the two biggest suppliers of military weapons, incidentally, to Ukraine, has been very, very strong, and is precisely the miscalculation that Putin made. He thought there would never be this level of agreement and unity across the alliance. So we've got to get that point absolutely clear. Of course, there are going to be discussions within allies. That's exactly as it should be. But they will head to Vilnius, showing a very united front to Putin. Putin made a spectacular miscalculation, as well as, of course, doing something which is truly heinous and appalling. And I think the central message that will come out is, for all the discussions that take place behind the scenes, that position of unity is clear amongst the alliance.
I just want to ask you finally, before we say goodbye, one more question in relation to the BBC and whether or not you think the public have a right to know who this presenter is.
Well, it's an important question, that. Look, I actually think that even though that is important, the more important thing is that we actually get the investigation concluded, because there are competing rights about privacy in terms of that individual. So I don't particularly want to start saying that that person should be unmasked, as it were, but I do think that this investigation needs to be concluded. Plainly, of course, if the police decide to take action, then that is a separate consideration altogether. But we're not at that stage yet, and it is important that all these agencies have the opportunity to consider this coolly, calmly and fairly. And that, of course, means fairly to the complainant and fairly, of course, to all other parties. So that's what I would invite them to do. Speed is of the essence.
Lord Chancellor, thank you very much indeed. Alex Chalk is also the Secretary of State for Justice. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now let's have a look at the forecast, the weather situation as we enter into a new week.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GBNews.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. We saw lots of showers over the weekend. There will be more to come today. In fact, some longer spells of rain too, and feeling quite fresh. And that's the picture for the next few days as well. Low pressure in charge of our weather, bringing showers and longer spells of rain. It doesn't go anywhere quickly for much of this week, really, keeping it fairly unsettled and cool. And yes, there is some sunshine first thing this morning, particularly across the north and the east, but towards the southwest we've got gathering clouds and outbreaks of rain. This is slowly going to push north and eastwards as we go through the day. Some of this rain could be heavy at times for parts of Wales into the Midlands, northwestern parts of England later as well. Elsewhere will generally be a case of sunshine and showers, and some of them will be heavy at times, possibly thundery too. Best of the sunshine towards the southeast, where we'll see highs approaching the mid-20s, feeling quite chilly under the cloud and rain. Into this evening, that rain pushes northwards and fragments into showers, but then towards the southwest we see further rain pushing into southern counties of England and Wales as we move overnight. Some of this will be heavy as well, and you can see further showers across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England too. So this will keep temperatures up, generally between 14 and 17 Celsius to take us into Tuesday morning. So it's a bit of an unsettled start. We have rain clearing eastwards across England and Wales, showers elsewhere, some of these heavy at times for parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, and then later on Northern England too. Some rumbles of thunder possible. A few glimmers of sunshine in between the showers, and feeling quite fresh, particularly around the west where it will be quite breezy. Temperatures in the high teens to low 20s across the UK, which is a little below average, particularly where we do have that strength of wind. Over the next few days it does stay unsettled, further showers, longer spells of rain, and temperatures generally on the cool side, reaching the low 20s.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GBNews.
OK, well, that's your setup. You know what's in store now for today and the week ahead. In store for us this morning,
we're going to bring you the latest on the suspended BBC presenter as the police are called in to investigate. The BBC suspends top presenter accused in the teen sex scandal as the corporation calls in the police to investigate.
Hello there, very good to see you. 1 minute past 7 on this Monday morning, 10th of July. You're tuned into Breakfast in GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. A BBC household name accused of paying a teenager for explicit pictures has been suspended, with the Metropolitan Police now looking into the claims. The Justice Secretary just told us in the last few minutes that the BBC needs to be given the time and space to investigate.
Say in the fullness of time, no doubt there'll need to be a consideration about how this has all been handled. But right now, they should have the time and the space to investigate these serious and concerning matters.
The American President Joe Biden has refused to back Ukraine's membership of NATO in a snub to Rishi Sunak ahead of talks between the two today. Biden will also meet with the King in Windsor, where the pair will discuss climate change.
A second girl has died following the Wimbledon school car crash. Police said Nuria Sajjad died of her injuries, with her family describing her as the light of her life.
In sport, England have reignited the Ashes with a tense victory over Australia in the third test at Headingley. Ben Stokes' team now sits 2-1 down ahead of a fourth test at Old Trafford, which gets underway July 19th.
And after a weekend that saw flooding in parts of the country, what's in store weather-wise for the coming week?
We saw lots of showers and thunderstorms over the weekend. Will there be more this week? We'll find out in the latest weather forecast with me coming up soon.
And the weather forecast is coming up soon. We're going to have, from today, weather forecasts in every half hour of the programme, so you don't have to wait too long to find out what way things are shaping up.
Point out that it's sponsored, which is obviously further indication of how well we're doing at GB News. People want to get involved and sponsor our weather.
They want to pay us money.
Exactly. It's good news.
OK. 3 minutes past 7. Top story is the BBC has suspended its male TV presenter accused of paying a teenager £35,000 for sexually explicit images.
Well, the state broadcaster is now facing questions over its handling of the issue after it confirmed that it first received a complaint in May.
So police will meet with representatives from the corporation today about the incident, but said they had not yet received any formal allegations.
Well, earlier we spoke to the Justice Secretary, who told us that the BBC and the police first need to be given the opportunity to investigate fully.
Well, I think the first thing to say, these are really serious and really concerning allegations, and they need to be investigated quickly. Now, in the fullness of time, maybe there will be a consideration as to how this was dealt with. I think the important thing now, however, is that these matters are investigated, whether that's within the BBC, but also potentially by the police, if indeed that's what the police decide to do. So there's a meeting today, as I understand it. I think we now need to give them the space for that to take place. So I think we don't want to be giving a running commentary at this stage. As I say, in the fullness of time, no doubt there'll need to be a consideration about how this has all been handled. But right now, they should have the time and the space to investigate these serious and concerning matters.
Well, our reporter Catherine Forster joins us from Westminster this morning. Good morning to you, Catherine. And I understand more talks then between the government and the BBC as this crisis continues.
Yes, absolutely. Director General Tim Davie met the Culture Secretary Lucy Fraser yesterday and assured her that they would deal with this swiftly and sensitively. She has asked to be kept updated at every stage of this investigation. And as we know now, following the suspension of the presenter yesterday, and conversations with the police, there is now going to be a meeting between the BBC and the police today. But big questions, and this is a real crisis for the BBC, isn't it? Because, of course, the mother first made the complaint way back on May the 19th, so almost 2 months ago, and questions about what the BBC knew and when and why they didn't act quicker. Now, suggestions that at that point they may not have been able to get in touch with the family, but the mother obviously incredibly angry because she said that these payments, £35,000 allegedly, that have been made over a 3-year period from the time that her child was 17 up to now when they are 20, have turned her child from a happy-go-lucky person into a crack cocaine addict. And of course, with a police investigation now likely, there is a possible jail term at the end of this. So huge pressure on the BBC.
Thank you, Catherine. Let's now get the views of investigative journalist and former police officer Mark Williams-Thomas. Mark was also known as the man who exposed Jimmy Savile. Mark, good morning. Mark, why are we waiting? Why are we waiting? So many people are very frustrated. It leads to people filling in the gaps and coming forward with all sorts of erroneous names. Why are we waiting for the presenter to be named?
Good morning, both of you. It's shocking, really. I mean, I think there's two aspects here. I think, as you say, Eamonn, it's caused a lot of speculation to fall upon other TV presenters. I was communicating with Jeremy Vine yesterday. I know Jeremy's come out and spoken about it, and obviously a number of other reporters, presenters have. It's shocking, really. The BBC have handled this again appallingly. You'd think with a track record, given how badly they handled the aftermath and just prior to it with my Savile investigation, they'd have got their house in order, but they haven't. You know, as we just heard there, the 19th of May they knew about this, and they've sat on their hands for 2 months. I called yesterday for his suspension, which of course should have happened much long ago, but it hasn't. And actually, it's the criticism and it's the profile and it's the work of the Sun newspaper and then obviously the other newspapers to follow who have brought this to the public's attention. The BBC really do need now to get their house in order. It's not complicated. Organisations, authorities deal with these issues day to day within their own members of staff, so they shouldn't deal with them any differently. And of course now, huge speculation mounting across all of the social medias. Who is the TV presenter?
Yeah. But Mark, what would you say to people who would say, look, the BBC didn't commit this alleged crime, it was an individual. Why is it the responsibility of the BBC?
Okay, so this is an individual who works for the BBC. He's the face of the BBC on many occasions and obviously holds very high-profile role. What they need to do is to show that, OK, it might not have happened on our watch, but the person does work for us. So you're an employee of an organisation. What they need to do is show impartiality, and they need to show some really victim focus. So they take the allegation, they do some very initial stages, which takes probably a matter of hours, maybe just a days, to be able to substantiate that and establish whether or not there is a prima facie case to be investigated, and then you suspend the individual. You suspend the individual on an impartiality basis so that you can then investigate what's going on. And if need be, you communicate with the relevant authorities, i.e. the police, potentially children's services, to make them aware of an allegation. That's what they should have done. They pay hundreds of thousands of pounds for security for consultants every year, and they've got this utterly wrong.
You know, the public's trust in the way the BBC conducts investigations isn't robust, really, is it? Following on from the Savile, the Harris scandals. We also had Tim Westwood, the whole handling of the Gary Lineker tweets, and, of course, the Richard Sharp loan. There's so many questions about the way they deal with these sorts of things. But also, I mean, the BBC might say, well, actually, we got it wrong on Cliff Richard, and therefore we will be slower. We will make sure we've got everything checked out before we publish any names. But perhaps they've got it wrong again on this one.
This is very simple safeguarding processes. You know, an allegation is made against an individual. The child is alleged to be 17 when it started, so under the age of 18, and potentially there are criminal offences in relation to possession and, or distribution of indecent images of children because the person is under age of 18. So they investigate that. They can very quickly establish whether there's a need to investigate it, and then they contact the authorities. You know, these are safeguarding issues, and they issue a suspension to the individual. I think that the BBC also has a duty of care to its other presenters. Other presenters have had to come out and clear their name or say it's not them, whilst their name's been circulated widely around social media. So they have a duty of care to other people. The problem is it's a huge organisation, the BBC, huge respect for them. They are brilliant. They've got some brilliant journalists. But some of the managers within the BBC literally have not got a clue what they're doing. They've paid a lot of money for some safeguarding consultants recently. recently. They've also brought on board safeguarding. But they've got this completely wrong. You talk to anybody who works in safeguarding, they'll tell you there's a very simple, clear process of impartiality, of suspension to remove this. I called for his suspension on Saturday night. It was only yesterday that they suspended the individual. What would they have done if this hadn't have got into the public domain? Would they have carried on with this person, in a fronting profile position? Because let's be very clear, even after they knew, they allowed the individual to appear and also significantly collect an award.
Yeah. Mark, the name's going to come out. It's going to come out. I mean, I don't really understand why it isn't out already. But do you agree? Do you think within the next few days we will know, no matter what steps are put in place, we're going to find out who this is?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the whole problem is that then his name is already out on social media. It hasn't taken a lot of people to work out who it is, given the amount of information that's now been released in relation to them. The question is who puts that name out? The BBC are not going to put that name out because they're going to be very, very worried that there is it leads to a witch hunt because of the way that this whole thing has been led. What they should have done is suspended the individual at least a couple of weeks ago, maybe as far back as the end of May, said that the person is subject to an investigation, and then spoken to the editors of the newspapers and said, look, there is this ongoing matter. It is a very sensitive matter, and got them to buy into it to some degree. And I'm sure actually a lot of the editors probably would have done. Because they've hidden it, because they've allowed this person to continue, because they've gone in a non-transparent way, that means that everybody starts digging. But let's be clear, probably the only person that can end up naming this individual is an MP in the House. Other than that, I can't see any broadcaster or any outlet naming the individual.
OK. Mark Williams-Thomas, thank you very much indeed for your time this morning. Really appreciate it. Mark's an investigative journalist. He revealed that Jimmy Savile was a sex offender, and he's calling for the presenter in question here at the BBC to be named.
In other news this morning, the US President has touched down in the UK, where he'll be meeting this morning with the Prime Minister ahead of the NATO summit in Lithuania tomorrow.
So these talks follow Joe Biden's comments that Ukraine's not ready to join NATO. That's seen as many as a snub to Rishi Sunak, who has backed their bid.
Well, joining us to discuss this more is the former advisor to Boris Johnson, Alex Crowley. Alex, it's going to be awkward, isn't it, between the pair? I mean, after everything that happened in Belfast, bit of a snub it was seen to the UK then, and there's a lot of divergence on NATO, on cluster bombs, and arguably even on climate policy.
Yes, I mean, it used to be the case that a visit of a US president was something to be looked forward to, almost celebrated for a prime minister to elevate themselves out of the whatever domestic concerns that they were having. But unfortunately, with this US president, a visit is something to be endured rather than welcomed. Every time he comes over, he does seem to find some reason to deliver a snub. Even when he doesn't come over, of course, he snubbed the coronation, although he will somewhat make up for that by having tea with the king at Windsor Castle. So it's not in a fantastic state, the so-called special relationship. It's not going to do many favours for Rishi Sunak, I don't suspect. And, of course, Biden has got his own troubles back home as well.
Although, you can understand, the whole issue of NATO, you expect the president to sort of lecture us a little bit on that. But Rishi Sunak's on firm ground, isn't he? Lecturing back, saying this decision on cluster bombs is abhorrent. 123 countries around the world have banned those. The UK very much one of those. He should be holding the US's feet to the fire on this. Yes,
he should. But although it's interesting, if we look at the wording that Rishi Sunak has used, he hasn't been quite as vociferous as that. He has I think the word he used was discouraged. And that's, of course, diplomatic speak for, well, I've got to say I disagree with this, but maybe privately we're probably OK with it. Because let's face it, yes, 123 countries have signed this prohibition against cluster bombs, which are, of course, awful. But at the end of the day, this is an awful war, and this is a war in which the main opponent, Russia, They don't observe any red lines. They don't have any qualms about using these sorts of things. And the Ukraine have rightly said, well, we have to, if you like, fight fire with fire. And obviously the Americans have gone along with that. And I suspect most of the rest of the Western alliance, again, privately, is probably OK with it. But, of course, they've got to say in public, oh, we don't think this is very on.
Alex, can I just get your views? John Kerry, who I think is the climate envoy for the Biden administration, certainly has been in certain parts of his life, and Grant Shapps are today hosting a meeting with a number of, I think, philanthropists and CEOs to try and drive money into the green agenda together. And then they will go and brief President Biden and the King together. Do you think there is any kind of question mark about the King's impartiality when it comes to green matters? And very interesting that the King is being briefed on a meeting that Grant Shapps is hosting on green matters.
Well, of course, the King has always had the green agenda, and he's always used it as a way to almost... The green agenda now is seen as something that is supposed to rise above politics. Now, actually, it shouldn't be that. It's still a contestable area. There are still many difficult policy choices that we should be debating in the realm of democratic politics. But everyone has broadly accepted the fact that the King is free to speak on green issues because it's nice and soft and cuddly, and it's all happy, and there's nothing contestable there. But of course, the reality is it is contestable, and so it might be seen as slightly odd. But of course, the King is briefed on the activities of ministers all the time. That is perfectly proper constitutionally, and he's demonstrated so far early in his reign that he does know where the limit is, and so I'm not too worried about that.
Well, it will be the first time he meets the President of the United States in his capacity as King, and I'm sure we'll see some of our best of British pomp and circumstance a little bit later on. Thanks very much, Alex.
Thank you.
OK, time 7:17. Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories. A second child has died following the Wimbledon car crash on Thursday. She's been named as 8-year-old Nuria Sajjad. Her families paid tribute to her, saying she was the light of their lives and embodied joy, kindness and generosity. Ministers say significant progress has been made in ensuring better support for rape victims, but campaigners are warning the government's been too quick to claim tangible improvements. Both the Home Office and the Ministry of Justice said a progress report shows the government's restored both the number of police referrals and the number of cases reaching court to 2016 levels. The mother of Stephen Lawrence has told the Home Secretary she remains profoundly concerned about the slow pace of police reform. Baroness Doreen Lawrence said existing police misconduct processes do not command the public's confidence, saying their application can be inconsistent and confusing. Now, time to check in on your Monday morning forecast.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GBNews.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. We saw lots of showers over the weekend. There will be more to come today. In fact, some longer spells of rain too, and feeling quite fresh. And that's the picture for the next few days as well. Low pressure in charge of our weather, bringing showers and longer spells of rain. It doesn't go anywhere quickly for much of this week, really, keeping it fairly unsettled and cool. And yes, there is some sunshine first thing this morning, particularly across the north and the east, but towards the southwest we've got gathering clouds and outbreaks of rain. This is slowly going to push north and eastwards as we go through the day. Some of this rain could be heavy at times for parts of Wales into the Midlands, northwestern parts of England later as well. Elsewhere will generally be a case of sunshine and showers, and some of them will be heavy at times, possibly thundery too. Best of the sunshine towards the southeast, where we'll see highs approaching the mid-20s, feeling quite chilly under the cloud and rain. Into this evening, that rain pushes northwards and fragments into showers, but then towards the southwest we see further rain pushing into southern counties of England and Wales as we move overnight. Some of this will be heavy as well, and you can see further showers across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England too. So this will keep temperatures up, generally between 14 and 17 Celsius to take us into Tuesday morning. So it's a bit of an unsettled start. We have rain clearing eastwards across England and Wales, showers elsewhere, some of these heavy at times for parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, and then later on Northern England too. Some rumbles of thunder possible. A few glimmers of sunshine in between the showers, and feeling quite fresh, particularly around the west where it will be quite breezy. Temperatures in the high teens to low 20s across the UK, which is a little below average, particularly where we do have that strength of wind. Over the next few days, it does stay unsettled. Further showers, longer spells of rain, and temperatures generally on the cool side, reaching the low 20s at best towards the south and east.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Got a bit of a debate for you to be involved in next. This is amid concerns that if you're a British student, you're likely to lose out to a foreign applicant for a university place.
Yeah, we'll be asking if people from the UK should be prioritised when it comes to higher education.
Still to come on the programme this morning, 7:45, we'll be finding out what's being the erratic weather, what's behind, maybe that word should have said. What's
What is?
Behind the erratic weather that's causing flooding and thunderstorms across the whole country.
And despite the rain, England managed to reignite their Ashes hopes with a victory over Australia at Headingley. 8:20, Paul Coit will be lighting our imagination with all things sport.
And look, all things you can join in on anything we have to say. We put the address up there on the screen and just reflect what you are saying here. As regards the BBC and its top name presenter, who has been suspended, David says it's not for the BBC to investigate criminal actions nor for the press to prolong proper investigation. This matter lies with the police alone.
Tam says the BBC don't want to reveal the presenter's identity for privacy reasons. Why? Because he's innocent until proven guilty? Well, I agree with that principle. We all do. But they weren't so concerned when it came to the issue of Cliff Richard. Margaret, everyone's desperate to know who this person is, of course, and we will know very soon. The question for me is, why would a mother complain to the individual's employer rather than go straight to the police in the first place?
Chris says they need to end the speculation and announce who this name is. Keep them coming in, GBnews at gbnews.com, or you can tweet at GBnews.
Now, the former director of UCAS, that's the University Application Process Organisation, they're warning that thousands of British students face missing out on places to foreign applicants at the UK's top universities.
Universities are apparently looking for more international students because they pay higher fees compared to domestic students.
It's all tied in with all the cost of living issues and rising inflation, and universities really struggling to make ends meet. So we're asking this morning, should universities be putting Brits first?
Martin Dobney says students from this country should be prioritised. And Diana Beach, who's here in the studio, says foreign students are the key to the university experience.
We should say who Diana is, shouldn't we, first of all? She's the CEO of London Higher, which is a think tank which represents, I think, 50 universities and colleges across the capital.
So is it, Diana, about learning or is it about making money, making a profit?
Good morning, Eamonn, and good morning, Isabel. Thank you for having me on the show today. Universities in the UK are extremely diverse communities, and we need these diverse communities to enhance our learning environments, whether you're a home student or an international student. It enriches the academic experience, it brings new diversity of thought, and really it is about creating a learning environment in which everyone can excel.
But Diana, no one's saying that foreign students shouldn't have a place. I think the concern is the rapid increase in numbers of those because they pay significantly higher fees and therefore squeezing out a number of, particularly, I understand, sort of children in the middle who are from sort of families that are just about managing as opposed to perhaps those who get supported through the system.
I understand concerns about growing international student numbers, but what I'd like to emphasise this morning is that there is enough capacity in the system. In the UK, we are lucky to have over 160 universities, a third of which are here in London. We represent over 50 universities and higher education colleges. There are enough places for everyone, and there's enough capacity in the system.
Are there really enough places for everyone? Yeah?
In those 160 universities, if you work it out, there must be tens of thousands of courses. Not everybody is going to be applying for the same course.
But Martin, the head of UCAS, or former boss of UCAS, was concerned about those top universities, many of those children striving from this country, many indeed British, but from diverse backgrounds, and simply will be facing no's when they come to their applications.
Yeah, we have to face facts that British students are now second-class citizens in the system because they pay less, because foreign students pay more. 485,000 foreign visa applications were applied last year. That's an 81% increase since 2019. And what happens is that universities are preferring overseas students simply because they pay more. As a consequence, the poorest students are priced out in the market. This all starts to go wrong in the 90s when universities basically became businesses. And now they're little more than finishing schools for the wealthiest students from abroad. And those who are most affected are the white working classes. They're the least likely now to attend British universities. And a part of that is because it's too expensive. I got a full grant. I'm a coal miner's son, and I got a National Coal Board top-up. I was the first boy in my family to make it to university, and I've repaid that investment many, many times in the tax I've paid over the years. But boys like me, girls like me, they don't bother anymore. It's too expensive to take on this massive debt. And universities are competing for the wealthiest overseas students because they want money. It's a business. It's not about outcome. It's about business and it's about profit. And those who have suffered the hardest are the British pupils.
I have to come in on the back of that and say, yes, international student numbers have gone up, but so has domestic demand for higher education. We now have more home students than ever before going to our universities. So that shows that demand for higher education is just increasing. And in fact, it's projected to increase even more until 2035. We are now at the start of a population growth in 18-year-olds in this country. We're predicted to need at least 365,000 more full-time places in the next 10 years.
But my point is, those who can afford it are able to buy this service. And what I'm saying is, those at the bottom, the working classes, can't afford it and are being priced out. There's no scheme to help them. There are no bursaries to help white working class people. There are no grants, there are no top-ups. They're being forced out of the market by a corporate system that favours the wealthiest. You have to admit that.
This is exactly why we need international students. International students bring a lot of money into universities. They actually subsidise the courses that home students do. And if they weren't there, they wouldn't be able to study these courses.
But Martin, I mean, that is a fair point, isn't it? We're seeing the financial pressures that these institutions are facing. Without the foreign money, yes, you might have British students, but perhaps you won't have the institutions.
What I'm saying is, if people were given a fair leg up in life, like yesterday, the front page of the Sunday Times says a reading and writing scheme for black children only in British schools. Outright, it's racism. What I'm saying is, there is no scheme or bursary to help the neediest, the factually, statistically provable neediest. There's no scheme to help them. What I'm saying is there should be, particularly in things like nursing. Why don't we have bursaries to get those people's leg up? Instead, you just brazenly admitted there this is simply about profit. And overseas students pay the most, and that's why they're welcomed in with open arms. And those who need this the most to break cycles of generational social depravity, they're absolutely swept to one side and forgotten.
There might not be financial support offered to children from different backgrounds in this country, but certainly the top universities, say Oxford and Cambridge, the vast proportion now of pupils applying are from state backgrounds, and actually it's almost impossible to get in if you have been through a private school system. There is a lot of pressure on the universities, not only to bring in foreign money, but also to up the number of poor students coming in.
Yeah, but the fact of the matter is, through the housing system, to live near a good state school or a grammar school or a private school, you have to be well off. So we have different tiers of education, and those are the kids that are the most likely to get into universities, not the poorest kids. What I'm saying is, there's not a single initiative or scheme or bursary in Britain to help the neediest pupils, the white working classes, the lower classes. There's nothing out there for them. And as a consequence, they're being forgotten and they're being just airbrushed from this entire system. That's my point.
Does he have a point, Diana?
Not at all. I mean, universities are autonomous institutions and they control their own admissions processes. And we just need to look to London. London has the highest proportion of disadvantaged students, the most ethnically diverse students. I'm talking pre-university in this country. But what has happened is their school attainment has absolutely excelled over the past decade. So actually, these students are some of the highest performing students in the country at the moment. Yes, they are from disadvantaged backgrounds, working class, if you like, but they are getting the grades to go to university, and that is why we're seeing the numbers increase.
Folks, thank you both very, very...
Go on, Martin.
You started.
Yeah, I was about to say, so we're seeing a huge number of overseas students, and 40% of those are remaining in the country. So that's an extra thing. So that's 100,000 people, plus their dependent children and relatives per year. That places a huge strain on the housing stock, on social services. This is an issue where British people are just always at the back of the queue.
OK. Martin Dobney, Diana Breach, thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Your views, very welcome. Get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.com, or you can tweet at GBNews.
Stay with us. We're going to be talking about Just Stop Oil. Judges are being urged to get more tough on them. We'll go through the papers and get the views of Chris Akabusi and Claire Pearsall next.
that university story that we were just talking about, Tony says, yes, Brits should be prioritised in placements, but it's all money-based. We have far too many universities offering pointless degrees to anyone with the money to pay for it. Karen says British-born nationals should always take priority over non-nationals, be it education, NHS, social housing. About time we implemented this policy.
Keep those thoughts coming in. We are going through the newspapers this morning in the company of the Olympian Chris Akabusi and the former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall. Welcome back to both
And just in case you don't know, he's an Olympian. He's got a blazer to prove it.
and a medal in his pocket.
1984 Los Angeles. And it still fits him.
Exactly.
What's that, 40 years?
Yeah, 39 years. Yeah.
You do
1984.
not age, do you?
No.
Justified. You're a medical marvel.
Oh, bless you, bless you.
You want to talk about Stop Oil?
Yes.
To start with. And the Times have got a story front page on this one.
Yeah, so basically, judges are being urged to get tough with Just Stop Oil protesters. You may remember the Dartford oil protesters who climbed up and had gridlock for a couple of days. Well, they were jailed for 3 years and 2 years, respectively, Morgan Trowland and Marcus Deck, anyway. And the effect of that really put the shivers up the protesters, so much so that we've not seen that sort of protests replicated. And so they're saying, well, that worked so well there, why are judges not penalising people with more custodial sentences?
Let me ask you something. The George Osborne wedding on Saturday, right, it turned out that the lady who sprinkled the orange confetti, it turned out to be harmless, but...
Correct.
What if it hadn't have been?
Yeah, exactly.
I thought it was quite frightening how close she got.
Correct. Yeah,
I don't know if he had security around him or not.
Precisely. What you'd have thought somebody of his grade would have security for life, and that was my thought precisely when I saw that. OK, this was harmless. She's only thrown
But look, someone swoops in from the right. I mean,
that could be a knife. That could be that could be anything.
That could have acid on it.
Yeah,
there's the security, and she gets sent away.
She looks so happy with herself.
Well, she looks nervous there though. She realised she's a bit conspicuous now. But security they were delinquent in their responsibility then. How did she get anywhere near enough to put confetti on his blazer? I mean, it is ridiculous and it is alarming. You know, we've had, I forgot the young lady's name, but Jo Cox.
Yeah.
You know, we had Jo Cox and we've had Martin, the South End chap. So we have got presidents in our community.
Sir David Amos.
So we have presidents in our community of the life-threatening...
knife attacks.
Yeah. So this needs to be stopped for sure.
Yeah. OK, so you say stop being so nice for these Just Stop Oil protesters. So the 2 or 3 old goats that got on the courts at Wimbledon at the weekend, what would you have done to them? Is there not public sympathy with them because they're old and decrepit?
No, I don't think so. I mean, look, another thing the article says is that if you're not careful, people will stop wanting to hold international events in the United Kingdom if we are not able to police our citizens and allow these events to go on unhindered. So there's a lot at stake here. You know, they are making a protest, and of course we protest. We don't want to stop people making protests, but you've got to be sensible in your protest.
We should point out Just Stop Oil did deny that she was one of theirs.
Yeah, well, yes,
confetti, but obviously you do have your own people.
But they were happy to retweet it, weren't they?
Yeah.
They were happy to, hey, look what we're doing.
Put it on their website. And,
so they promoted it, they've marketed it, and we are talking about it, so they're getting what they wanted.
Claire, what do you think?
Yeah, I think we need to stop giving them the airtime, if I'm brutally honest. But
the oxygen of publicity.
Yeah, and I think because that's exactly what they want. But I'm seriously impressed as to how they get tickets to all of these big sporting events. Now, to get to Wimbledon, they've been to cricket at Lord's, and we all know how difficult these tickets are to come by, and the rugby. So, their methods are...
Unless you're a multi-millionaire and you've got links into all these scenarios, because, you know, their leader...
It was interesting how Silverstone dealt with it yesterday by using facial recognition ID. Which
That
is going
created
to set a
uproar.
whole new set of problems because there are people who don't like that kind of surveillance.
Yeah,
but
you see,
it did manage to keep people out of Silverstone.
The thing about Silverstone is nobody really talks about it because nothing happened. But think of the operation that must have been in place
But would facial
to make sure nothing
recognition
happened.
have stopped the old lady with the confetti?
Of course not. If she is
never
not-
committed a crime,
if
she
she's
probably
not on
runs
a
the WI
list.
down in Bruton.
It depends. I mean, this is a very good point because this is the problem that a lot of people have with digital ID and facial recognition and the way the world is going. So it's because, actually, and I'm against this, but if we had a digital ID and you could see her voting patterns, you could see the people she interacts with, you would be able to identify her. And that is the scary thing about where we are going.
It is, but unfortunately people like this are now pushing the country to take more extreme measures. I don't believe that they should be allowed to disrupt the public walking slowly in a road. The police have to be quicker. They're getting better at dealing with it, but everybody is frightened to move people on because the right to protest, which I fully support, but don't do it when you're stopping people getting to a hospital, to a school, to a loved one, or just to work and earn their living.
Chris was saying, where are we going as a country? Claire, here's a story in the Mirror, page 4 in the Mirror, and there's a poll on Friends. 8%, that's less than 1 in 10 of people in this country say they have no friends whatsoever. So that's sad, isn't it?
It is really sad, which is why I wanted to bring this up, because I find that's an appalling statistic. I think we all realise as we get older, you have a small group of very good friends. I'm very lucky. Can probably count them on one hand, who are very good friends. But to have none, I feel, is just indicative of the life that we now lead. People work from home, people use online as a way to meet friends, so you don't meet them face-to-face and have those kind of interactions. You don't necessarily go to pubs, restaurants, nightclubs necessarily where you would meet people. And it just seems that human interaction is falling away and we're all becoming more insular. And I just found that was pretty horrendous. It's those aged 35 to 54 have the fewest pals.
Really? I find that extraordinary.
Well,
I'd have thought this was a symptom of an ageing population and families being scattered. So, somebody loses their partner, they're a long, long way from their family, and these people are incredibly lonely. People in my age bracket,
I guess you define...
I have enough time to see all my...
No, I know.
I'd want to define what do you mean by friends? I mean, I've got thousands of friends and I've got no friends.
Yeah,
oh, no, don't say that.
No.
I know exactly what you want. You and I would consider you my friend.
Yeah.
But when did I ever see you? I don't see you, but I sort of feel that if I didn't see you for 5 years, I could turn up at your front door and say, "Hiya, Chris, I was just passing."
So I think you're friendly, and I'm friendly, and I enjoy your company. And when we collide, brilliant. And I've got loads of people who I collide with on a daily basis at the golf course, walking in the woods, coming to work. That's great. But the question is, how many people... Now, I've got family who, if I was in dire straits, I'd go, mate, I'm having a wobbler here. And I've got close family. My eldest daughter, anytime, Ashanti, the old man's have a wobble. How can I help? So I've got that. I don't know how many friends I'd go...
Do you think that's also a slightly male thing? I don't know, as men get older, maybe it's the women who do a lot of the... If you go out, my mum always says, you go out to wherever for dinner and it's just groups of women everywhere with a bottle of wine out on a girls' night, and perhaps guys aren't as good at socialising.
Well, funny, I was in a restaurant in Belfast recently. It's very strange. And there were 36 people in that restaurant, right? And there was 2 men, me and another guy, and the rest of them were women driven by alcohol. I don't even think they were. I don't think they were eating or anything else, but they sat there and they all had bottles of wine and they were all having a great time.
Yeah.
And you could well be right that women might make friends easier.
Just have lots of people they can find. Let us know. Are you one of those? What was the statistic?
8%.
8%.
8% of people who say they have no friends, and if so, get in touch. Let us know. That's really sad.
Good.
Lift you up.
But you're right, you categorise people. You may have family, you have friends, you have acquaintances.
Yes.
And I would say, in tribute to you, Chris, your personality is such, you would be like a magnet to people.
100%.
So if you hadn't got much of a personality, then you would draw less people to you. So in a way, you're a bit unbalanced from the point of view that you're attracting more people.
Well, no, yeah, I'll go from here. I'll go and play golf. I've got loads of things to do. In the golf course, I'm chatting and I'm talking. I could basically be quiet. We're trying to have a conversation. I've got friends all over the place. But so if you mean that,
but in a crisis, who you call?
Yeah, exactly. I would have think long
you
enough.
can call me anytime.
Bless you, Eamonn.
God bless. Okay.
Right, Claire, we'll have more from you and from Chris in the next round. Thanks very much.
Right, let's bring you up to date with what else is happening news-wise. Thames Water says its shareholders have agreed to provide a further £750 million in funding through to 2025. However, it warned that around another £2.5 billion will be needed in following years for a turnaround to be delivered.
Business owners are optimistic about their prospects and ability to hire as early signs of inflation falling start to show, according to a new survey. Business optimism in June hit its highest point since August last year, indicating above average positivity.
Wimbledon enters its second week as home fans root for remaining British players in the doubles after a series of wins on Sunday. Jamie Murray won both his men's and mixed doubles matches, while British pair Joe Salisbury and Heather Watson also made it through to the third round. So, I was talking to Isabel there. She had a few things to do over the weekend, and which were outside, a fair being one of those things. And you were a bit on edge. You were a bit nervous. You didn't know whether to wear a hat, whether to have an umbrella with you. You were water boots, whatever. Weather was difficult to work out, but it was still warm.
Yeah, it was sticky, really sticky, but sort of wet as well. Horrible. So we're asking this morning, you know, and actually I was in one of the places that wasn't very badly affected. Lots of bad flooding over the weekend. Whether or not that's over, I don't know. Major cities like Liverpool experienced bad flooding, and yellow weather warnings were in place overnight for the West Country. Look at that.
Yeah. Well, Nathan Rao, the weather journalist, is here with us this morning to talk about this. I mean, when you look at the weather maps and things, you can sort of work out the science as to why this is happening, and there'll be a lot of rain, I think, this weekend as well. Not touching everywhere, but it depends how it comes into the country and whatever it is. Is the weather, how would you describe the weather? Is it normal? Is it wacky? How would you describe it?
I would always describe the weather as wacky. I mean, the weather we're getting at the moment, this is what we saw over the weekend, this flooding, which was quite significant in parts of the country. It's not unusual. We had a huge thunderstorm warning from the Met Office. I think it covered pretty much the whole country. They're very, very difficult to pin down, thunderstorms, so they usually put out a big warning, and anywhere in there you can get thunderstorms, which can be sporadic. This is not unusual for this time of year, but going forward now, the Met Office is suggesting that we're going into a more Atlantic regime with the jet stream coming across the UK and bringing more unsettled weather towards us. So the outlook is really for, yes, a further ongoing risk of thunderstorms and heavy rain at times, warmer, sort of average, slightly below average temperatures, actually, they're saying, in parts the southeast, London, Kent, Sussex, that sort of area will be drier and warmer and less prone to flooding. But it's really more of the same that we're getting, and we're coming under the influence of the jet stream, which always means we're going to get the Atlantic, which always means rain, I'm afraid.
Well, can I say something? When I leave the house in the morning, when it's the early hours of the morning, and the heavens have opened, this rain has stopped, but the place feels so fresh. The garden smells lovely. The idea that the rain has come down and you can see we need this.
I mean, if you think, it was literally a year ago to the day that I was actually in here talking about 40.3 degrees in the UK, which we'd never had.
A year ago.
It was about a year ago, not to the day, but pretty much it was July last year. And we'd had weeks and weeks and weeks of very, very hot, dry weather, and the parks had all turned brown and everyone was hating it. And I'm like you, Eamonn, I actually think when we get a nice heavy downpour of rain, it waters the garden, it keeps everything green, and you get that lovely, cool, fresh feeling as well. On a note of that, if you get high pollen counts, which we're also getting at the moment, the rain can actually bring it down. Bring it down to no levels. So you can actually notice your hay getting worse.
But we haven't mentioned climate change in all of this. We can't forget that June was the hottest June on record. Met Office saying something sinister at play here. And, of course, we've seen global mean temperatures and the sea warming at an alarming rate.
Yes. Now, this is very interesting. The Met Office have talked about the long-term forecast for the next to the end of summer being slightly hotter than average in the UK, a 40% chance of it being a warmer than average summer. Part of that is global, is sort of the climate change issue. There's other things like atmospheric things and El Nino and all that sort of stuff. We've also had the warning from the World Meteorological Organization that we are heading towards this 1.5 degrees C increase above where we should be going pre-industrial levels, and they think that might happen on a temporary level in the next 5 years. So there's absolutely no doubt that our climate is changing, and actually that's why I said to you at the beginning, Eamonn, the weather is wacky. We're getting extremely hot summers, we're getting flooding, not just in the UK, but globally. So there is a climate change element to this, and depending on which side of the fence you fall, it's whether it's entirely or whether it's human man-made, whether it's carbon dioxide or not, but certainly the climate is changing.
Well, listen, we've got to let you go because you start your job in Sainsbury's at 9 o'clock.
That was supposed to be a secret. Nobody knows about that.
Well, I was just thinking, my local mini-mart Sainsbury's...
You just need a name badge.
The guy that runs...
Oh, is that? Yes, do you know what? I see where you're going.
You didn't get the connection.
I didn't get it. I just thought
you look like you're going to stack shelves after.
Yeah, I was going to say Tesco's, Eamonn. It's not saying... yeah, Sainsbury's, if you need me, I'm there for you today.
Ready to go. Good man. Lovely
Sponsored
talking
by.
to you. Always your pleasure. You're so well prepared with all your info and your charts.
Lovely.
And things.
Good energy.
Really appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed. And on that subject, here's your Monday morning forecast.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GBNews.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. We saw lots of showers over the weekend. There will be more to come today. In fact, some longer spells of rain too, and feeling quite fresh. And that's the picture for the next few days as well. Low pressure in charge of our weather, bringing showers and longer spells of rain. It doesn't go anywhere quickly for much of this week, really, keeping it fairly unsettled and cool. And yes, there is some sunshine first thing this morning, particularly across the north and the east, but towards the southwest we've got gathering clouds and outbreaks of rain. This is slowly going to push north and eastwards as we go through the day. Some of this rain could be heavy at times for parts of Wales into the Midlands, northwestern parts of England later as well. Elsewhere will generally be a case of sunshine and showers, and some of them will be heavy at times, possibly thundery too. Best of the sunshine towards the southeast, where we'll see highs approaching the mid-20s, feeling quite chilly under the cloud and rain. Into this evening, that rain pushes northwards and fragments into showers, but then towards the southwest we see further rain pushing into southern counties of England and Wales as we move overnight. Some of this will be heavy as well, and you can see further showers across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England too. So this will keep temperatures up, generally between 14 and 17 Celsius to take us into Tuesday morning. So it's a bit of an unsettled start. We have rain clearing eastwards across England and Wales, showers elsewhere, some of these heavy at times for parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, and then later on Northern England too. Some rumbles of thunder possible. A few glimmers of sunshine in between the showers, and feeling quite fresh, particularly around the west where it will be quite breezy. Temperatures in the high teens to low 20s across the UK, which is a little below average, particularly where we do have that strength of wind. Over the next few days it does stay unsettled, further showers, longer spells of rain, and temperatures generally on the cool side, reaching the low 20s at best towards the south and east.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GBNews.
Stay with us, we'll have the latest for you in just a moment on the suspended BBC presenter as the police are called in to investigate.
The BBC suspends the top presenter accused in the teen sex scandal as the corporation calls in the police to investigate.
Good morning, welcome to the programme. It's 8 o'clock on Monday, the 10th of July. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Leading our news this morning, a BBC household name accused of paying a teenager for explicit pictures has been suspended. The Metropolitan Police are now looking into the claims. The corporation's Director General, Tim Davie, confirmed that the star was dropped after new allegations came to light.
President Joe Biden has refused to back Ukraine's membership of NATO in a snub to Rishi Sunak ahead of talks between the two this morning. Biden will also meet with the King in Windsor, where the pair will discuss climate change initiatives.
A second girl has died following the Wimbledon school car crash. Police said Nuria Sajid died of her injuries, with her family describing her as the light of their lives.
And England have reignited the Ashes with a tense victory over Australia in the third test. Paul Coyte's here with all the latest sports news from Headingley.
Yeah, thanks, Izzy. This could be the greatest Ashes series of all time. 2-1 down, 2 to play, and also 160,000 people saw Brad Pitt win the British Grand Prix. or Max Verstappen.
That's a whole other story, that is.
So.
And the weekend, there was a lot of intermittent, unpredictable weather. There was actually flooding in parts of the country as well. As for what's in store for the week ahead...
We saw lots of showers and thunderstorms over the weekend. Will there be more this week? We'll find out in the latest weather forecast with me coming up soon.
And that first forecast of the hour you can see at 8:15. Top story is the BBC has suspended one of its male TV presenters accused of paying a teenager £35,000 for sexually explicit images.
Police officers will meet with representatives from the corporation today about the incident, but said they'd not yet received a formal allegation.
Well, earlier on our programme, we spoke to the journalist who exposed Jimmy Savile, who said the BBC needs to get its house in order.
It's caused a lot of speculation to fall upon other TV presenters. I was communicating with Jeremy Vine yesterday. I know Jeremy's come out and spoken about it, and obviously a number of other reporters, presenters have. It's shocking, really. The BBC have handled this again appallingly. That you'd think with a track record, given how badly they handled the aftermath and just prior to it with my Savile investigation, they'd have got their house in order, but they haven't. You know, as we just heard there, the 19th of May they knew about this, and they've sat on their hands for 2 months. I called yesterday for his suspension, which of course should have happened much long ago, but it hasn't. And actually it's the criticism and it's the profile and it's the work of the Sun newspaper and then obviously the other newspapers to follow who have brought this to the public's attention. The BBC really do need now to get their house in order. It's not complicated.
Well, I think the first thing to say, these are really serious and really concerning allegations, and they need to be investigated quickly. Now, you know, in the fullness of time, maybe there will be a consideration as to how this was dealt with. I think the important thing now, however, is that these matters are investigated, whether that's within the BBC, but also potentially by the police, if indeed that's what the police decide to do. So there's a meeting today, as I understand it. I think we now need to give them the space for that to take place. So I think we don't want to be giving a running commentary at this stage. As I say, in the fullness of time, no doubt there'll need to be a consideration about how this has all been handled. But right now, they should have the time and the space to investigate these serious and concerning matters.
Well, that was the Justice Secretary speaking to us on this programme a little earlier. Let's cross to our reporter, Paul Hawkins, who's at Broadcasting House for us this morning. Big questions for the organisation this morning, not least what they were told when that first allegation was made in May, and questions about whether or not they have had a suitable response.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, the further allegations printed in the Sun newspaper this morning allege that the family in question are upset with the initial statement made by the BBC before the weekend, that no one from the corporation went to them for a proper interview after the initial complaint. Square that with the BBC statement, which said that the BBC actively attempted to speak to those who have contacted them to seek further detail and understanding of the situation. If we get no reply to our attempts or receive no further contact, that can limit our ability to progress things, but it does not mean our inquiries stopped. The other allegation in the paper this morning is that the presenter twice tried to contact the individual at the centre of this, the now 20-year-old, and that they asked their mother to stop the police investigation. And we haven't been able to verify those claims made in the Sun newspaper today, but it does increase pressure on the BBC to act quickly. And as you say, there are questions for the BBC in terms of the questions that were asked of the presenter to start with, why it has taken so long. And bear in mind that the police are meeting the BBC later today. We should get some, hopefully get an update from the Metropolitan Police, and then tomorrow we've got the presentation of the BBC's annual statement, and of course lots of questions for Tim Davie, least of all about the statement itself and more so about this.
Paul, I just want to ask you a legal question, because we had a question from a viewer and I thought it was probably a really important point to get into and explain. You know, we're talking about somebody at the start of this alleged I don't know what you call it, transaction, was when he was under the age of 18. You could legally have a physical relationship with someone under 18. It's specifically the passing of those images, whether or not it's with consent, is irrelevant. That is the thing that could lead to prosecution.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, yeah. There's a piece of legislation that dates back to 1978, I think it is, which says that to own, make, share, possess images of that nature of someone under the age of 18, and they cannot give consent while they are under the age of 18, that is the criminal act, and that is what they are looking into. So that is the reason why this is being taken, the BBC is taking these allegations extremely seriously, and why they're trying to act as quickly as possible. And as I say, the police are involved, but as they've said themselves, no formal referral or allegation has been made, and they need more information before they can continue with their investigation.
Paul, thank you very much for explaining that. And I was also reading from a legal expert that he could also be charged with sexual exploitation under the Sexual Offences Act of 2003. So, as you say, incredibly serious allegations.
Well, as you can imagine, The Sun have a hotline to the family involved in this, and their headline is Suspended BBC Man's Panic Calls to Youngster. Joining us in the studio, psychotherapist Lucy Beresford. And Lucy, apparently, according to The Sun, as relayed by the family, the presenter rang last week asking the youngster, well, the youngster's now 21, I suppose, what have you done? He also asked the youngster to ring their mother to get her to stop the investigation. What do you read into that as a psychotherapist?
Well, it sounds very bullying. It sounds like they want to wrestle back control. And I think what we have to recognise is that these kinds of relationships are very much predicated on two major pillars. One is about power and one is about control. And in that moment, it probably felt like to the other person that they had completely lost control.
Is the instigator, the perpetrator, are they aware that it is about power for them?
Not necessarily. A lot of this will be very unconscious motivation. What we know is that for some people, they may have an outward appearance of a very controlled life, one that's full of all the things that they have driven their lives for, and that they feel very in control of a lot of their lives. But they might not feel in control of their emotional life. There may be emotional needs that are not being met. And that might even include things like risk-taking. So if you can imagine the typical profile of someone who is very ambitious, very driven, perhaps very successful, particularly if they're male, they can often be very long, for example, in the hormone of testosterone. And that hormone is very linked to other traits like risk-taking and not really worrying about the future consequences of your actions. And so what you might find is that the very traits and the very sort of personality style that gets you to be a very successful, very sort of in-control person are also the very traits that might lead to your downfall.
And perhaps, you know, the mentality of somebody who is as famous as we're led to believe this person is, you do develop a sense of being perhaps above the rules, a sort of entitlement, people pandering almost to you, and perhaps you feel like you're untouchable.
You might feel you're untouchable, you might feel a little entitled, or you might just feel everything gets very stale and you're looking for the next risk, you're looking for the next challenge, and also you're looking for that connection. All human beings are looking for connection in some degree. But this was a very, one is led to believe, a very transactional connection. So again, that builds in that sense of power and control. But I also think we need to think about the fact that psychologically, you might not necessarily know that what you're doing is this great risk-taking thing. All you can feel is that life is perhaps beginning to get out of control. And what many people in this situation are experiencing is a sense of, I wish someone would stop me. I wish actually this secret will actually come out, and that actually you don't have to take responsibility for the ending of this situation, that actually that ending is taken away from you.
Well, there's no doubt that if all of this is true, this is career ending, it has to be said. What about the industry that we're talking about, broadcasting and television? Why do we so often hear, I mean, it may not be exclusive, this pattern of behaviour to broadcasting, but why does it seem to be?
I don't think it is exclusive to broadcasting. I think what we're looking at, and we see it a lot in the political world, again, we're looking at people who have very elevated positions of power. They have climbed a very particular ladder, which is very hungry, very driven, and you have to be very ambitious to get to the top in that industry. And as I said, those traits which can serve you so well in a career term, could also perhaps be the seed of your downfall in an emotional term.
Lucy Beresford, thank you for the insight. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Now, in other news this morning, the US President has touched down here in the UK and will be meeting with the Prime Minister this morning ahead of the NATO summit in Lithuania tomorrow.
That's later, it's tomorrow, right? The talks follow Biden's comments that Ukraine is not ready to join NATO, seen by many as a snub to Rishi Sunak, who has backed the bid.
Well, joining us from Downing Street this morning is our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. And Darren, look, we know what a slick operator this particular Prime Minister is. He'll be looking to try and make this look as glossy as possible. But there is significant divergence between these two statesmen, not least on the matter of NATO, but also cluster bombs and potentially even on climate change.
Yeah, indeed. Good morning, Isabel and Eamonn from Downing Street. A pretty busy Downing Street, it must be said, this morning. The press very much waiting. President Biden expected around 10:30 here this morning. Downing Street very keen to emphasise that this is the 5th time that President Biden and Rishi Sunak have met in as many months. It's the 6th time they've met overall since Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister last autumn. I think keen to say the special relationship really is still quite special. But you're also right in saying that while overall, particularly when it comes to Ukraine, clearly the US and the UK have been working incredibly closely, there are some cracks in that relationship, not least of all over cluster bombs. We heard over the weekend the United States is going to supply those bombs to Ukraine in the weeks to come. Now, the UK, along with many NATO allies, has signed up to effectively say that they're not willing to do that. They're effectively banned. The United States has not gone that far. President Biden thinks that Ukraine is running out of munitions and that they are needed. The UK not willing to support that move. Also, on this issue of Ukraine joining NATO, something President Zelensky is very keen on. Again, the UK has been supporting that bid, the United States saying it is way too soon. And there are also disagreements on who potentially the next NATO Secretary-General could be. The UK battling for Ben Wallace, our Defence Secretary. It seems that Joe Biden wants to see the EU Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, take over that role next year. So there are some cracks, but overall, you're right, there'll be handshakes, there'll be smiles, there'll be pleasantries today. Must be said, the main action actually is not really here. We're expecting President Biden for around an hour. But the big thing will be in Windsor later on today when President Biden is going to meet the King. You may remember he missed the coronation, but there's going to be a big ceremony at the Quadrangle in Windsor Castle for President Biden before he gets on his plane again and heads to Lithuania for NATO and its main summit tomorrow. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, will also be there. He's flying out tomorrow morning.
Thank you, Darren. As Darren mentioned, next stop for President Biden, Windsor. Our royal correspondent Cameron Walker joins us now live from there to give us the latest. Cameron, good morning.
Good morning, Eamonn. Yes, well, the King is President Biden is expected to spend a lot more time with President Biden than the Prime Minister is this morning. It's the first time since the King's coronation that King Charles has met the US President. But of course, during the coronation, it was Jill Biden, the First Lady of the United States, that represented that country at the coronation. Some critics of the President called that a snub of a US President with an anti-British agenda. But more realistically, it was actually just following customs and traditions, because no US president has ever attended a coronation of a British monarch. But of course, the red carpet is being rolled out here at Windsor Castle today. The excitement has actually been building since Thursday here in Windsor, because 2 US military helicopters were spotted flying over the castle in an apparent rehearsal for President Biden's visit here today. The King is going to be meeting the President in the Quadrangle of Windsor Castle. There's going to be a special guard of honour provided by the Welsh Guards, and the band of the Welsh Guards is going to be playing the US national anthem for the President. Then the King and the President will inspect that guard of honour and watch a military march past. But then inside the castle, there's going to be a strong emphasis on climate change, because inside this morning, financial and philanthropic leaders from the US and the UK are meeting for the Climate Finance Mobilisation Forum, strengthening commitments to tackling climate change. And the King and the President are going to hear the conclusions of that meeting. There's expected to be a strong emphasis on helping developing nations when it comes to climate, to dealing with the challenges of climate change. The President in the past has expressed his delight and admiration for King Charles for his previous work on tackling the climate crisis and environmental activism. They have met previously at G7 in 2021 and at the COP26 conference in Glasgow. But of course, this is just a very short stopover in the UK for the President of the United States, because he'll be getting on a plane and flying to Lithuania for the NATO summit later.
OK, Cameron, thanks very much indeed.
Let's bring you up to date with what else is happening with the time at 8:18.
A developing story this morning, Thames Water says its shareholders have agreed to provide a further £750 million in funding through to 2025. However, it's warned that around another £2.5 billion is needed in the following years for a turnaround to then be delivered.
A second child has died following the Wimbledon car crash on Thursday. She's been named as 8-year-old Nuria Sajid. Her family has paid tribute to her, saying she was the light of their lives and embodied joy, kindness and generosity.
The mother of Stephen Lawrence has told the Home Secretary she remains profoundly concerned about the slow pace of reforms regarding serving police officers who commit serious crimes. Baroness Doreen Lawrence said existing police misconduct processes do not command the public's confidence, saying their application can be inconsistent and confusing.
And as we approach 8:20, here's the forecast. Let's have a look at the Monday morning situation.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GBNews.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. We saw lots of showers over the weekend. There will be more to come today. In fact, some longer spells of rain too, and feeling quite fresh. And that's the picture for the next few days as well. Low pressure in charge of our weather, bringing showers and longer spells of rain. It doesn't go anywhere quickly for much of this week, really, keeping it fairly unsettled and cool. And yes, there is some sunshine first thing this morning, particularly across the north and the east, but towards the southwest we've got gathering clouds and outbreaks of rain. This is slowly going to push north and eastwards as we go through the day. Some of this rain could be heavy at times for parts of Wales into the Midlands, northwestern parts of England later as well. Elsewhere will generally be a case of sunshine and showers, and some of them will be heavy at times, possibly thundery too. Best of the sunshine towards the southeast, where we'll see highs approaching the mid-20s, feeling quite chilly under the cloud and rain. Into this evening, that rain pushes northwards and fragments into showers, but then towards the southwest we see further rain pushing into southern counties of England and Wales as we move overnight. Some of this will be heavy as well, and you can see further showers across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England too. So this will keep temperatures up generally between 14 and 17 Celsius to take us into Tuesday morning. So it's a bit of an unsettled start. We have rain clearing eastwards across England and Wales, showers elsewhere, some of these heavy at times for parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, and then later on Northern England too. Some rumbles of thunder possible. A few glimmers of sunshine in between the showers, and feeling quite fresh, particularly around the west where it will be quite breezy. Temperatures in the high teens to low 20s across the UK, which is a little below average, particularly where we do have that strength of wind. Over the next few days it does stay unsettled, further showers, longer spells of rain, and temperatures generally on the cool side, reaching the low 20s at best towards the south and east.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GBNews.
Now stay with us. England have rekindled their Ashes hopes after a nail-biting victory over Australia in the third test.
Paul Coyte, he'll be here with that story and everything else that happened over the weekend.
Welcome back. Still to come on today's programme. Between unpredictable weather, crowded airspace and industrial action, the chances, I'm afraid to say, of your holiday flights being cancelled is pretty high. But at 9:15, we'll give you some top tips on what to do if the worst happens.
Oh, I don't know if I can be bothered. And then, is your cost of your weekly shop going up? Well, we think if you freeze more food, that could keep your prices manageable, including the milk.
Just need a big enough freezer, that's the problem.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Where am I going to put it all? My freezer's already full.
2 litres of milk, where am I going to put that?
Exactly. I've already got my sausages and my... What have I got? A couple of ice lollies. There's no room. But I like the idea. I think it is a good idea. Maybe we all need to buy huge freezers. It's the solution.
Many of them. I have 3 fridges.
Do you? You have 3 freezers?
Well, I have 3 fridges. And there's 2 freezers.
Crikey. My freezer's that big. Family of 4. Need to do something about that.
And I have a little fridge in most rooms in the house. I do.
It's like a hotel, that's why.
Yeah, but I mean, so if you want a cool drink, there's always one available.
It's a mini bar.
It is like a mini bar. That's what
gin and tonic available at all times.
That's absolutely right.
Sounds wonderful.
You can join in, share your stories. GBViews, GBnews.com. Love to hear from you. What a weekend of sport. Let's try and go through the back pages and see how they report it. First of all, the Express back from the dread. England's cricketers battled back from the brink to beat Australia by 3 wickets in the 3rd test. And now we can win the Ashes, says the Telegraph. Ben Stokes believes England are on the stroke of an epic comeback. And you might even call it Lando Hope and Glory if you're the Mirror. The British racing driver Lando Norris came 2nd in the Grand Prix at Silverstone yesterday.
Well, let's speak now to
Is a Lando not... Is a Lando... Not a Landau. It was a carriage.
I just think Lando, Hope and Glory.
But isn't a Landau a horse... a carriage pulled by horses?
Like Martin Landau?
No. That's another variation.
That's another Landau, yes.
Yeah. Never heard that as a name before.
No, I've never seen a Landau.
Here's my mate Lando.
Yeah.
No.
I don't know.
Anyway.
He's the first Landau I've ever known.
Yeah, OK. So, my friend...
Yes, sir.
The Ashes, first of all.
Yes.
It's game on.
It really is. Honestly, I think it's been a great weekend, and there's so much positivity around sport at the moment, and with the cricket. And I remember you saying to me last week, look, it's not going to happen, is it? There's surely not a chance that we can win. Well, look, really, really important win at Headingley. Looking good. Then we move on now to Old Trafford, so that's 9 days away. So
they've got to win Old Trafford.
They have to win all 3. It's basically that's it. You
and
have
then
to win all 3.
It goes to the Oval for the decider.
Correct. That is where. Well, should they manage to actually win? Touchwood, of course, Old Trafford. But things are looking very good. But they've been really close. All games so far have been really close. It's been a matter of either just a few wickets or just a few runs that each side has won by. So each one has been very close, so why not? I think it'd be amazing. And if we can actually turn it around and win the Ashes, I think it'd
very, very exciting.
So very close.
Where were you at the weekend to see us on your Instagram? You were off to see, was it Billy Joel?
I went to see Billy Joel. I was Wimbledon Thursday. Billy Joel. Do you think I'm sounding like a middle-aged man now, going to Wimbledon on Thursday and Billy Joel on Friday?
It's like a remake of Craig David.
Is it?
Each day of the week.
It was. But I took my daughter, and went to see Billy Joel. And the thing is, first time I ever went to see Billy, I was 17 years old, and none of my mates would go along with me because they didn't think it was cool enough.
And why did none of your mates go this time round? Same reasons?
Well, no, it's better this time because I managed to take my daughter, who was 17,
and
also
why 17. What would she know about Billy Joel?
She knows.
She's well educated by her daddy.
Incredibly well educated about music. She knows everything from the Stones and Billy Joel.
That's such a lovely story. So you were 17 first time you went. You had no mates. Now you took.
I'm glad you appreciate the story there, Isabel.
Beautiful daughter, and you had a father-daughter moment. And
it was great.
Words.
We sang all the words. It was fantastic.
But
it was
love it.
No,
I would like to have seen that. I would. And then what was the other concert? Springsteen was on.
Springsteen was on the next day.
Same venue?
Yeah, same again.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that would have been double 3-hour Springsteen.
OK.
Did you not? We could have gone to go see Springsteen.
You two need to go to see some music together.
I think we should. I really do think we should. And I think you should.
Unless we're in a velvet seat, padded velvet seat.
Oh, now come on.
I'm not interested. Standing?
Yes.
Where are you with standing?
I'm all right with it.
Nah, not for me.
Slightly moving around in a rhythmic fashion to the music that's playing. Yes, it was great. So look, what should we do? What do you want to talk about?
Wimbledon, really.
Wimbledon?
Yeah.
You know what? Wimbledon for me. Now, this is Elina Svitolina against Victoria Azarenka, which was the one that took my interest, I think, more than anything yesterday. So Svitolina's from Ukraine, Azarenka is from Belarus. So you can see where the problems are going to lie there
It's
between
the first
the
time
countries.
on the circuit the two countries or any country associated with Russia has come face-to-face with a Ukrainian player.
Well, we did see it in French. We did see it in the French.
But something different happened there. I can't...
Well, it was the handshake again. I mean, it was Kotyuk of Ukraine that was then booed for not shaking hands with the Russian player. Oh no, that was about
what is it with
player
people?
As well.
What is it with people?
No, I think this is right.
Well, look, see where you stand because I'm.
Well, and I'm saying they should be applauding Svitolina for not shaking hands.
She'd made it clear beforehand that as far as a country is at war with this country, and therefore she will not shake hands. She'll play tennis, but she won't shake hands at the end. So
Belarus and Russia and all these countries, they shouldn't be part of this tournament.
I agree with that. And
I had the dilemma on Friday when we had the chance to see on some of the outside courts a couple of the Russian players, and we just walked straight past. Just couldn't do it.
Whereas Wimbledon, they were the ones that were under sanctions. They banned them last year. And then you've got the ATP and the WTA, all the tennis organisations that are saying, this is a disgrace. It's not their fault that their country... And it seems to be like one of the only sports that are so strong to say it's not fair on the actual athletes or sports people, which I think there's a much bigger picture here.
Folks, let us know what you think of the picture. gbviews@gbnews.com, or you can tweet at GBNews, because it'll be very interesting to reflect you and see what you think about this one. Tell you, a lot I felt sorry for at the weekend in the Tour de France, Matt Cavendish.
Mark Cavendish, yeah. Well, Mark is probably our greatest ever cyclist. 34 stage wins in the Tour de France. He's 38 now. Missed last year's because he wasn't picked. So he's gone out today, for this Tour de France starting last week, and said that this is going to be his last, that he's going to retire from cycling. So all he needs to be clear and become the greatest ever sprinter in the history of the Tour de France is to win one more stage. Now, he crashed out over the weekend.
Literally crashed.
Really, and broke a collarbone. So it looks like, I mean, it's an awful way to end the career, that would be it, that it's all over. But as far as the team's concerned, the actual team principal has said, well, you know, we're willing to give you another go if you're prepared to go through it again. And I've spoken to Mark Cavendish about this before, and he says it's the most painful, it's the most emotionally difficult thing to go through physically and mentally, is to do the Tour de France. I said, why? And he said, because I love it. That's why. So the chances are he will come back next year, although he's called time on the career, that if you give it another chance, another lifeline to break this record, then, you know, I think there's a good chance that he will do it and take it.
Can I just say the inbox has gone crazy with the Lando debate?
Yes.
You're right, Eamonn. Landau is a horse-drawn carriage. Whereas this person says, this is from Nicola. Dear Eamonn and Isabel, Lando Norris is named after the Star Wars character Lando Calrissian. I'm surprised Paul Coit did not know that.
I tell you why. I'm one of the only people that's never seen Star Wars. I interviewed Mark Hamill about Star Wars, and I couldn't actually tell him I've never actually seen the film. So that's why I didn't know Lando, so I'm sorry to let you know.
Plural. Yeah, there you go.
Never seen it.
So, funny, we finished in cycling there. Isabel's husband's a top competitor on a bicycle as well, but unfortunately he's crashed out as well.
He got hit by a van last week.
No, he drove into a van.
No, he didn't.
He, like an Exocet missile, he headed straight for a van and bashed into a van.
That's not what happened. The van
What happened?
pushed him.
Right, sure.
The van was
had big
stopped
wing
in the middle of the
mirrors.
road and then pushed him across the road into another van, which is reversing out of a vehicle, and he has a huge, big black and yellow arm. And as you said to me over the weekend, it's just as well it was his arm and not his face or his head.
Terrible.
But he's not a professional cyclist, he's just a...
Is he out of the Tour de France, though, for next year?
Yes, thank God.
OK, just going to make sure.
Well,
I just want to adjust my
cycles
notes.
every day, and we have to get a progress report when he gets to work. He texts Isabel.
Don't make me worry.
And we know he's OK.
It's all right.
Until we hear
differently.
Stop.
It's a tough world out there on a bike.
Keep those stabilisers on. That's what he needs to do. It's very dangerous out there.
Do you think you'd be any more stable if you had a tricycle?
Well, I used to have a tricycle, and I was quite stable, but then again, I was about 5 at the
Had it
time.
got a bin on the back of it?
Yeah, a little bin, and just a little saddle bag. I never really knew what to put in there. So, tricycle.
You remember the advert? We all love tricycles. They're tricycles as nicicles. They're nicicles as tricycles.
God, I can't believe this is the first one you've stumped me on. I don't remember the tricycle advert.
Yeah, and they've secretly done away with tricycles in this country. I mean, it's a terrible...
That I am disappointed in.
Huge dent to your human rights.
But you did say, as far as cycling was going, you always wanted a chopper. I had a tomahawk, which is in between a chipper and a chopper.
Yeah.
And that was like, it was like the chopper. I never quite got to the chopper.
No.
But the tomahawk was a bit more
luxury.
than a chipper.
It was luxury, that.
It was luxury.
Thing. Orange, I liked as well.
Very nice.
Metallic green was good.
Stirny Archer. Gears on the front, very nice.
Lost on me, must say.
So you
must not be lost on us.
We all love tricycles. They're nicicles as tricycles.
No.
Well, beautiful, beautiful breakfast. Stay with us, because what are we going to do?
We'll have all the latest on the BBC suspending a big presenting name after new allegations have come to light. Stay with us, go through the papers with Chris Akabusi and Claire Pearsall.
let's bring you through the newspapers on this Monday morning. Doing that, we've got Chris Akabusi and Claire Pearsall. And Claire, we want to start with the BBC presenter scandal. The Sun owning this story and leading today all over the front page. Suspended BBC man's panic calls to youngster is the headline.
This whole story, it does beg the question as why did this not go to the police earlier? When you look down at the timeline of events, it was back in May that it was brought to the attention of the BBC. Now, why the BBC didn't feel that it needed to involve the police at that point needs some explaining. And there is a lot of explaining, I think, that needs to go on. Why is it taken from May till the beginning or pretty much the second week of July for the police to be involved and the suspension of the presenter themselves? That's only happened across the weekend due to the fact that The Sun had put out a story.
Yeah.
I think it does, and I have always said that we shouldn't name that person until such times as there is proper evidence. But I do wonder now if we are moving, and my opinion is that we are moving, that he has to be named, I would say probably by the end of the day. I think that it is now moving quicker. There is more evidence coming out there. And The Sun would not have printed a story on 2 consecutive days if their legal team didn't think it was robust enough. And given that they are the ones who have spoken with the family and have that relationship, their legal team would have been all over this. So I think the BBC are going to probably, by the next 24 hours, name that person.
That being said, they have a duty of care, presumably to their employee who has been with them for a very long time. And safeguarding has to be a factor in all this. It didn't happen on BBC premises or BBC Time, as far as we're aware, even though he is the face of it. There is a big question on debate around the right to privacy versus the public interest. And I suppose people pay the licence fee, don't they? They have an expectation of certain standards, so there is an entitlement there on the public's behalf.
100%. And look, I mean, when you talk about going to the police, my challenge is why Mum, who has gone to, I'm assuming The Sun, I'm assuming she's talking to The Sun, didn't find it appropriate to talk to the police in May. Because I'm a father, 4 children, and if anything like this happened to my children, I would immediately involve the police. But yes, there is a duty of care with the presenter. I don't know what his family are going through right now. That's where my mind is. I mean, obviously the young boy, I think we know it's a young boy. Yeah. The young boy has got his family looking after him, but the children, I mean, if I'd got myself into trouble, I think about my children and how they must be feeling when they go to school, or my elder children, they're in their 30s, when they go to work colleagues and they've got the name, Akabusi. You know.
It's interesting the point you make about the mother. A few emails actually sharing your views on that, Chris. PK said, is anyone asking the question why this mother waited 3 years before raising this issue? Has the money stopped being paid to her now grown-up so-called child? Chris says, why did the 17-year-old mother...
I don't think she knew about it initially.
Right, that's a legitimate response then. Why did the 17-year-old mother go to his employer and the newspaper about these allegations in the first place? Wouldn't the police be the first place you would go? So there are questions, I think, about that as well, and what the BBC actually did know.
One of the points we wanted to bring up, though, was the fact that, that in one of the other papers, it's talked about, other BBC male presenters who've been named and shamed as the possible person in question, and they've felt the need to have to come up and defend themselves. And in fact, on social media, they're now saying, if you don't defend yourself, it must be you. You know, now, I'm not privileged in a position to be a male presenter on the BBC, but the idea that I'd have to defend myself, it's like saying, when did you stop beating your wife? The moment you start defending yourself about beating your wife and doing things, you're guilty by association. And that sort of mud sticks. And with the BBC, I do understand why they've taken the time and gone through all the protocols and processes, because, as I mentioned, Sir Cliff Richard got named and shamed, and he was innocent.
Yeah.
So these are serious allegations, and they do need to...
I do think that this is the problem with social media as well. Everything is now so instant, and you've got the classic quote that a lie is halfway around the world before the truth has got its boots on.
Yeah.
And that is sped up even more so in social media land. So the speculation is so rife out there. People are feeling they need to defend themselves. There are defamation cases going to be brought against people for not removing it. And I think we are in a really difficult position with social media where people don't understand what it is they can and cannot say in cases like this. We have to be very careful.
And what makes people feel that their instinct, you know, they talk about people they don't know, oh, it'll have been him. Definitely him.
But I think it's very easy to say that when you're a faceless person on the computer. You wouldn't go up to somebody necessarily in the street and say, well, the majority of people wouldn't do that.
But the tragedy in all of this, Claire, I think, not in relation to the actual offence, but in relation to the online safety issue, is actually all that will come out of this is a bunch of lawyers making a lot of money in defamation cases. Actually, I don't think the social media platforms will change. I think, you know, genie's almost out of the bottle when they cannot police that.
Again, I saw, pardon me, sorry, Claire, I saw somebody who had named somebody inappropriately, and the presenter threatened him, and in the tweet he said, oh, yeah, really? Where are you going to send it? Do you know where I live? Ha, ha, ha. So actually, people, these warriors, they're quite bold in their...
Let's try and squeeze 2 stories in the 3 minutes that's left. Claire, this is the Mail. Civil servants can't work from the beach after demanding the right to carry out their jobs overseas.
Now, I'm a staunch defender of working from home. It's brought a great deal of ease to my life and also a great deal of productivity that I don't have in the office. But I think this one pushes it too far. To carry out their jobs from overseas, even on their sun loungers, I think, no. Working from home is one thing. Working from abroad because you want to go visit your family and friends or...
Have a holiday
and you think you can log in... I'm not convinced that this is going to be the best use of taxpayers' money, which is what it is, but also how are you going to ensure that person's work is up to scratch if they're suddenly sending it across?
I mean, I don't have a problem with that. I think if someone goes on a 2-week family holiday and they want to stay for an extra week but just be with the family in the evening in the lovely sunshine for meals or whatever, but working throughout the day, I don't see why that's an issue. I think we have to be able to trust people to be responsible and do their job, and if not, you sack them.
We just be talking about BBC presenters. They trust people. No, I mean, when you're on holiday,
but not his ability to do.
No,
his job.
I know.
You know,
so
we treat everybody like children these days. If someone's not turning up and delivering what you need them to do, you get rid. And if they're able to work from home, then what's the difference if they're...
But I think that highlights the problem with the civil service, is that you can't say that somebody isn't performing and just get rid of them. It doesn't work like that. We all know those difficulties. And there are so many government departments that are not functioning as they should. So it's not necessarily working from home that's causing it, but I think by adding sunshine and a glass of something alongside of it, I think on taxpayers' money, and they are going to be the ones forking out for the laptops, the connectivity and everything else.
Well,
not a good thing.
Talking about the something sparkling or whatever, Chris, Wimbledon, should you be able to hear the sound of champagne corks popping there or not, and if so, when?
Well, I love the story, the idea that put a cork in it is the headline in The Sun, and it's about champagne bubbles going off in the middle of the games, and there was a particular match in which someone was just about to serve, and whoop, they had the umpire said, "Oi, be careful," basically, that's like it. But I just laughed because golf and tennis, they have got these rules about making noises, but now, have you heard of the Live Tour, the Golf Live Tour? And they've got boom boxes and ghetto blasters. I played in a pro celebrity game up at the Bedford, up at the Belfry, and there was music blasting and people were dancing around the greens while you're putting. And I want you to juxtapose this with track and athletics, as you've already seen. I've got my Olympic blazer on from '84. And actually, noise is a good thing. When you come from the training environment, where it's really, really quiet, and you come into the arena and you've got this cacophony of sound, you fall into the atmosphere and it raises you up, and the adrenaline glands are really flowing because you know you're in this peculiar environment. And actually, silence itself also has a particular sound, a phenomenal sound, where you go from this roar of anticipation to the silence of, oh, your marks. Great.
The sound of silence. There we go.
I can be silent.
Nothing that I would ever put in the same sentence as you, Chris, but anyway. Thank you very much, my friend. Have a good rest of the day. And thank you, Claire. Really appreciate it. Chris Akabusi and Claire Pearsall there. Right, the time is 9 minutes before 9 o'clock.
And it is holiday season for lots of people, but we're being warned, aren't we, that there will be lots of problems this summer and we could all be eligible for compensation if your trip is cancelled or delayed.
I don't want compensation, I just want my holiday, I want my trip, but don't want anything else.
Absolutely.
So industrial action and summer holidays, no, 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 no. It comes as the weather plays a part in all of this, air traffic control plays a part in all of this. So what can you do to get your money back if your travel is disrupted? Let's go to consumer expert Kate Hardcastle, and she will tell you. You do a fair bit of travelling, Kate, but I must say it doesn't really fire me up to look forward to it, knowing it's going to be an industrial hit summer.
Morning, both. Absolutely. How sad is it? Because we've got a lot of people heading off for their first family holiday since 2019. That's why we've got this sudden surge in the airports. You're all seeing at the moment, people have been really saving hard and potentially they're going to be impacted by this air traffic control strike action. It wasn't that long ago, and we were talking about potential strike action at Heathrow. That got all smoothed over. And it's not just your airlines too. It's actually, we know there's going to be more rail disruption and underground disruption. And guess what? The majority of it is planned or said to be planned if it goes ahead with air traffic control right at the heart of the children's summer holidays, when a majority of people will be trying to get there. And I think it's just a word to the wise. There's lots of noise out there in terms of your rights, but actually when it comes to strike action, it's classed as extraordinary, which means that it isn't covered under the majority of insurance policies, and you don't have the rights for compensation. You do have rights to be able to be supported to get to your destination, food and beverage if you're delayed a long time, even a hotel if you're delayed a long time, but not actually when it comes to the compensation of strike action.
And even then, you know, there's caveats, aren't there? When you say delayed a long time, quite often it can be, if you're delayed more than 2 hours, you're entitled to a glass of water or something. But they suddenly find the wheels are off, you know, 1 minute before that time elapses. So it's just inconvenience and, you know, they always seem to wriggle out of it, I find.
It's really stressful, Isabel, isn't it? Because you know what travelling with children's like. It's a different entity, even though it's not fair when you're just grown-ups. I suppose you can have a conversation about it and try and get methodical about it. When you've got children who've probably left the house early doors to get to the airport, lots of excitement, doesn't mix into a blend of happiness and happy travelling. So I think the first sort of thing in mind is, if it is going to happen to you, and it does happen when you're at the airport, stay calm, but make sure that you persist to find out your rights. There is a duty of care of the airline to get you where you're going, and it's important that you make sure you go into that help desk with what you would like to see as the action too. So check out your rights pertaining to the situation. I think the main thing as well with the compensation element is a lot of people are trying to get around it. So they're trying to look for insurance policies now that might cover them, because the air traffic control strikes has already been mooted, even though it's not a date that's been set. You wouldn't be covered because it's already in the public domain, and insurance is there for the unknown.
With those words of wisdom, Kate, we've got to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. Consumer expert Kate Hardcastle there. I hope your summer and your travelling during the summer goes well. Here's your Monday morning forecast.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GBNews.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. We saw lots of showers over the weekend. There will be more to come today. In fact, some longer spells of rain too, and feeling quite fresh. And that's the picture for the next few days as well. Low pressure in charge of our weather, bringing showers and longer spells of rain. It doesn't go anywhere quickly for much of this week, really, keeping it fairly unsettled and cool. And yes, there is some sunshine first thing this morning, particularly across the north and the east, but towards the southwest we've got gathering clouds and outbreaks of rain. This is slowly going to push north and eastwards as we go through the day. Some of this rain could be heavy at times for parts of Wales into the Midlands, northwestern parts of England later as well. Elsewhere will generally be a case of sunshine and showers, and some of them will be heavy at times, possibly thundery too. Best of the sunshine towards the southeast, where we'll see highs approaching the mid-20s, feeling quite chilly under the cloud and rain. Into this evening, that rain pushes northwards and fragments into showers, but then towards the southwest we see further rain pushing into southern counties of England and Wales as we move overnight. Some of this will be heavy as well, and you can see further showers across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England too. So this will keep temperatures up, generally between 14 and 17 Celsius to take us into Tuesday morning. So it's a bit of an unsettled start. We have rain clearing eastwards across England and Wales, showers elsewhere, some of these heavy at times for parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, and then later on Northern England too. Some rumbles of thunder possible. A few glimmers of sunshine in between the showers, and feeling quite fresh, particularly around the west where it will be quite breezy. Temperatures in the high teens to low 20s across the UK, which is a little below average, particularly where we do have that strength of wind. Over the next few days it does stay unsettled, further showers, longer spells of rain, and temperatures generally on the cool side, reaching the low 20s at best towards the south and east.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Stay with us. Coming up, we'll bring you the latest on the suspended BBC presenter as the police are called in to investigate. The BBC suspends the top presenter accused in the teen sex scandal as the corporation calls in the police to investigate.
Hello, very good morning. Good to see you. 1 minute past 9 on this Monday morning, the 10th of July. You're tuned in to Breakfast on GB News. Eamonn and Isabel here.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. A BBC household name accused of paying a teenager for explicit pictures has been suspended, with the Metropolitan Police now looking into the claims. The Justice Secretary told us the BBC needs to be allowed to investigate.
Say in the fullness of time, no doubt there'll need to be a consideration about how this has all been handled. But right now, they should have the time and the space to investigate these serious and concerning matters.
President Joe Biden has refused to back Ukraine's membership of NATO in a snub to Rishi Sunak ahead of talks between the two today. Biden will also meet with the King in Windsor, where the pair will discuss climate change initiatives.
England's reignited the Ashes with a tense victory over Australia in the third test at Headingley. Ben Stokes' team now sits 2-1 down ahead of a fourth test at Old Trafford next week.
And after a weekend that saw flooding in parts of the country, what's the store for the week ahead?
We saw lots of showers and thunderstorms over the weekend. Will there be more this week? We'll find out in the latest weather forecast with me coming up soon.
Greg, with that forecast in about 15 minutes' time.
So it is our top story this morning. The BBC has suspended one of its male TV presenters accused of paying a teenager £35,000 for sexually explicit images.
Police officers will meet with representatives from the corporation today about what took place, but said they had not yet received a formal allegation.
Well, earlier on the programme, we spoke to the investigator who exposed Jimmy Savile and said the BBC needs to get its house in order.
It's caused a lot of speculation to fall upon other TV presenters. I was communicating with Jeremy Vine yesterday. I know Jeremy's come out and spoken about it, and obviously a number of other reporters, presenters have. It's shocking, really. The BBC have handled this again appallingly. That you'd think with a track record, given how badly they handled the aftermath and just prior to it with my Savile investigation, they'd have got their house in order, but they haven't. You know, as we just heard there, the 19th of May they knew about this, and they've sat on their hands for 2 months. I called yesterday for his suspension, which of course should have happened much long ago, but it hasn't. And actually it's the criticism and it's the profile and it's the work of the Sun newspaper and then obviously the other newspapers to follow who have brought this to the public's attention. The BBC really do need now to get their house in order. It's not complicated.
Well, we also spoke to the Lord Chancellor, also the Justice Secretary, same person, who told us that the BBC and the police need to be given the opportunity to investigate fully.
Well, I think the first thing to say, these are really serious and really concerning allegations, and they need to be investigated quickly. Now, you know, in the fullness of time, maybe there will be a consideration as to how this was dealt with. I think the important thing now, however, is that these matters are investigated, whether that's within the BBC, but also potentially by the police, if indeed that's what the police decide to do. So there's a meeting today, as I understand it. I think we now need to give them the space for that to take place. So I think we don't want to be giving a running commentary at this stage. As I say, in the fullness of time, no doubt there'll need to be a consideration about how this has all been handled. But right now, they should have the time and the space to investigate these serious and concerning matters.
Well, let's cross now to our reporter Paul Hawkins, who's at Broadcasting House for us this morning. Good morning to you, Paul. I suppose the question is how damaging this sex scandal is for the corporation.
Well, yeah, there are a lot of questions that the BBC need to answer about what happened after that initial complaint was made on the 19th of May. What questions were asked of the presenter? Why weren't they suspended first when they first heard about this complaint, and then what steps were taken after that? There's also a gap that's emerged between what the family of this now 20-year-old are saying this morning, according to the Sun newspaper, and what the BBC have said on Friday, and that is The Sun reporting this morning that the family are upset with the BBC's response on Friday. They said no one from the corporation went to them for a proper interview after the initial complaint. On Friday, the BBC said that they actively attempted to speak to those who have contacted them to seek further detail and understanding of the situation. If we get no reply to our attempts or receive no further contact, that can limit our ability to progress things, but it does not mean our inquiries stop. So that's one of the complaints that the Sun are alleging this morning from the family. They're also saying that the family are saying that the presenter contacted the individual in question and asked their mum to try and stop the police investigation. So lots of questions for the BBC, who we understand are meeting with the Metropolitan Police later today. And then, of course, questions for Tim Davie, the Director General, tomorrow, when he's due to meet journalists to talk about the BBC's annual report. But one would have thought that that'll be the last thing they'll be asking about.
Cheers, Paul. Thank you very much indeed. I think today will be another day of speculation. I mean, you imagine their broadcasting house. People be saying who's in today, who should have been in and who are not in, who's been stood down, which then just, does more to put the name.
The jigsaw identification, yeah.
Yeah. Let's now speak to the Shadow Financial Secretary to the Treasury, who joins us now from Westminster. James Murray, I know you've got a lot to talk about, but I suppose we've got to start with the BBC and how you see the situation and what you think should happen next.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the allegations are deeply concerning, and I think it's right that the BBC's investigating them, obviously. I think we should limit speculation over the details of what happened whilst the investigation's underway. But I do think that once the investigation has concluded and we know what happened, I think it's right then to also look at the process of the BBC and to make sure that we can have trust in those processes in the future.
Do you think that social media platforms need to do more to stop the spread of defamatory allegations, as we've seen countless other male presenters over the weekend being forced to come out and get involved in this seedy story?
Well, yes, as you say, we've seen a lot of other presenters having to come and say something publicly. I mean, I think, the question about social media here is part of a wider question about how do we regulate social media. In Parliament, we've been debating the online safety bill for many months now. There's a really broad question, not just about how content is moderated, but also about what happens to harmful content and so on. So I think when it comes to social media, this is part of the question we need to ask, but it's actually a much broader topic about social media as well.
James, let's talk about a big policy plan that Labour set to announce today, setting out plans to deliver a national warm homes plan, which is a great idea, but the wrong day, really. I mean, it's a bit. Do you think people have really got the appetite for this with all the heat that we're experiencing?
Well, I have to say, as I'm stood here feeling a little bit sweaty already at sort of barely 9 a.m. in the morning, it's probably talking about keeping your homes warm at the moment might not be the top of people's minds. But, winter will come round. And we remember what happened last winter when everyone had to switch their heating on and bills were going through the roof. We will have another cold winter and we'll need to make sure we keep our homes warm then. And the real problem with housing in the UK is that we have some of the draftiest homes in Europe. There are 19 million homes in the UK that need to be upgraded in terms of their insulation. And the really important thing about doing this insulation programme, this retrofit programme, is that firstly it saves people money. It brings down the average household bill by £500, by up to £500 permanently. That's an investment to make sure those bills come down. But it also creates jobs. It creates job opportunities for up to 4 million people across the country, people with skills such as roofers, glaziers, plumbers, mechanics, and so on. And so it helps with the economic growth that we've been so sorely lacking for the last 13 years.
As you know, President Biden is in town. He's meeting with the Prime Minister this morning. And I just wanted to get really Labour's view, firstly, on whether or not they think Ukraine should be allowed to accede into NATO, and also whether or not Labour would be tough enough to hold the US's feet to the fire on the issue of cluster bombs, which Rishi Sunak is clearly not in favour of being supplied to Ukraine.
Well, look, I think our position, and indeed the UK's position on cluster bombs, is very clear. We in the Labour Party, we're opposed to the use of cluster bombs in conflict, but that's a cross-party position. That's a long-standing position of the UK to be a signatory of the Cluster Munition Convention. Now, we know the US and Ukraine are not signatories of that convention, and I'm sure they won't have taken the decision about cluster munitions lightly. But actually, what we need to do is make sure that we are working hand in hand with the US, with all other NATO allies, to support Ukraine and make sure that they win against Russia following the illegal invasion of their country.
Right, so sorry, you don't have a problem then? You would be agreeing and unifying behind the US on the issue of cluster bombs?
Well, no, look, we're very clear on our position on cluster bombs. We oppose their use in conflict. We are signatories of the Cluster Munition Convention in the UK. That's something which happened under the last Labour government, but it has cross-party support, long-standing cross-party support in the UK. That decision was taken by the US, who's in a different position, but our position on that is very clear.
Sorry, just on that point, because I didn't catch your response fully. In relation specifically to whether or not Ukraine should be allowed to accede into NATO, which is Rishi Sunak's position, the president is opposed to that. What is Labour's position on that?
Sure. Well, I think, when we're talking about Ukraine and NATO, obviously there is a question about timing, because if Ukraine were to join NATO immediately, that would have profound consequences, because by virtue of the way that NATO is established and the fact that Ukraine is at war with Russia, NATO would then be pulled into that direct conflict with Russia, which is obviously something that we need to avoid. Now, in terms of the longer term, the support for Ukraine and the longer term joining of NATO, that is something which we should look at. But I don't think right now is the right time, because we're in this position where if Ukraine were to join NATO immediately, it would obviously draw us all into that direct conflict with Russia, which we need to avoid.
OK, James Murray, thank you very much. James is the Shadow Financial Secretary to the Treasury, and he's talking about plans to heat up your house, the National Warm Homes Plan. But as James said, sure as heck, winter will come about. You mightn't be in the mood to listen to what to do today, but there will be a time. So you insulate your house, and this will boost job opportunities as well. Maybe we'll come back to this, James, in the autumn or something, and we'll talk about it again. So as you say, it's got to be done, and winter will come about. Thanks very much for your time this morning.
Let's get some analysis on all of that.
Thanks a lot.
The meeting between President Biden and Prime Minister Sunak today with our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, who joins us from Downing Street this morning. I don't know how much you're able to hear of that, Darren, but interesting, really, siding with the US, with President Biden on the issue of Ukraine's membership into NATO.
Yeah, indeed, it is interesting that Labour's taking that position. I think all in all, though, this is a bit of a moot point in the sense that it's simply just not really going to happen without the United States support. Clearly, Ukraine is not going to be able to join NATO, and it's not just the United States. You look at, for example, Sweden's having difficulty trying to join NATO at the moment. It doesn't have the support of Turkey or of Hungary, and it meets all the criteria by quite a long way. But you're right in saying that there are divisions between Rishi Sunak and President Biden. Overall, they're pretty much on the same page when it comes to Ukraine, but there are a couple of cracks. And why do I say that? Is because we are expecting President Biden here in Downing Street in just over an hour's time. This is the 5th time that the two have met in as many months, the 6th time overall since Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister in the autumn of last year. I think they do personally get on quite well. They spend quite a lot of time individually talking to each other without officials in the room. But clearly, on this issue of NATO membership, there is a disagreement. When it comes to cluster bomb ammunition as well, there is a disagreement. The United States for the weekend saying that they are going to supply those weapons to Ukraine, that frankly it needs weapons as it runs out, as this war progresses beyond its 500 day. That is something the United Kingdom does not agree with. It's signed up along with a hell of a lot of other NATO countries in opposition to cluster bombs. And then there is also this disagreement about who should become the next NATO Secretary General. The UK would love to see Ben Wallace, our current Defence Secretary, take over, but again it appears that President Biden prefers Ursula von der Leyen, the EU Commission President. In saying all of that, There'll be lots of handshakes, lots of smiles on the steps of number 10 today. A very busy at number 10. The world's media are here. And the two will also get to meet again when they travel both to the NATO summit in Lithuania, which starts tomorrow. The main deal, though, and I know Cameron Walker's going to talk about this, is not going to be here. It's going to be in Windsor Castle a little later on when President Biden gets to meet the new king.
Appreciate it, Darren. Thank you for the update. Britain's Newsroom coming up at 9:30 in 15 minutes' time with Andrew and Beverly to tell you what they're talking about.
What everyone's talking about. What's going on at the BBC. Extraordinary story.
Andrew, how long can it go before the name is released?
I would give it 24 hours, 36 hours.
Tops,
Because how many more BBC presenters can say, not me, Gov? Quite a few have already done that. So many people know who it is. We all know in the studio who it is. It'll be on social media, of course. And I think the BBC is saying privacy. Well, hang on, this is damaging the entire corporation because people think, is it him?
Yeah.
It's a real mess.
It is.
And the fact that the Director General of the BBC only was told on Thursday when the complaint was made by the family in the middle of May. Big questions about the governance of the BBC, how they've handled this, and it seems to me they've handled it very badly.
Yeah, I think so. I was talking to a couple of BBC presenters yesterday, and I think the feeling amongst the staff is they need clarification onto who the accused person is, because it will take the attention off everybody. People like Jeremy Vine and Rylan, they've been coming out very, vocally on social media to say, we are not the person. And who knows, the BBC might make a statement during our show this morning, so watch this space.
If there's justification in the story that the Sun is running, this is career-ending, isn't it?
I think it is.
Yeah.
I think it is, because of the amount of money involved. £5,000 in one go. Extraordinary.
I think, for me as well, I think the part of this story that I find the most chilling is the mother behind the scenes asking for help and saying to the BBC, this is my young person, they are now an adult, and they have a drug problem which is being funded by this individual. And I think my heart breaks for that person. Can you imagine being that mother and seeing your child addicted to drugs and then reaching out to the person's employer to say, you need to help?
And some people are criticising her for not going to the police, but she may not have realised this was breaking the law because the person was 17, of age, legally, to consent, may not have realised that actually it's against the law for any of images to be shared under 18, even with consent.
Yeah.
So I defend the mother for going to the Sun because she was probably desperate.
And also Biden meeting Sunak in our show.
Yeah.
Yes, that's just under an hour's time. That'll be
Frosty
fantastic.
relations between those two. Well, it'll be a bit warmer today.
So keep it here on GB News throughout the day.
And after this, we're talking about the cost of your weekly shop going up constantly and whether or not freezing food could actually be the best way to keep prices manageable. Now, a food waste expert is claiming that you could actually save up to £1,000 a year by using your freezer.
Depends what size your freezer is, of course. Kate Hall freezes all her ingredients to avoid food going off and being thrown out.
And with the price of food going up every day, buying and saving food could be all the more crucial. I'm pleased to say she joins us now. Good morning to you.
Hiya, Kate.
So freezing is the way forward, and you're talking about everything from cheese, milk, you name it, the whole works.
Literally everything. So anything that is at risk of going in the bin, basically.
Okay.
So I don't freeze things just for the sake of it. But if I have used some vegetables or some fruit, or I've got half-used jars of things, then I will freeze the leftovers instead of letting them go in the bin.
But your motivation is doubled now, because not only are you not wasting food, but you're saving money here. And with the price of food, goodness sake, all of us realise that our shop, our groceries, our takeaways, our restaurant meals, everything is just sky high.
100%. And I think by saving those ingredients as well, you start to realise that not only are you saving the money from not letting the things go in the bin, but actually it means that you've got a stash of frozen ingredients that are there available to you. So the temptation to pop to the shop to get a couple of ingredients and then end up spending more than you planned or getting expensive takeaways, it's really reduced. If you've got those ingredients there, it makes it a lot easier. So you sort of save double time really with that, which is really satisfying and really helpful to keep in budget.
You must have a huge freezer, though. I mean, I don't know where you find the space. I struggle to get stuff in as it is, and then to label it and know what it is. All of these things are actual, logistical problems, presumably.
It is a challenge, but I actually work with quite a lot of people that just have, 3 drawers and, kind of an average amount of space. I've got one tall freezer, a sort of an integrated one, and then I've got an ice box, which you just saw on the screen, which is where I tend to freeze things sort of open on trays so they don't stick together. But really, the attitude that I have is that if you can switch your perspective of your freezer from freezing for long-term use to literally just using it as a pause button, and also there are a lot of things that you can do to make space. So you might be surprised that actually, if you take things out of, boxes, so if you've got one fish finger left in the box, move it to a freezer bag, just hold on to the instructions. And then even things that are in normal packaging, if you've got vegetables that are just a little bit in the bag, if you get everything into freezer bags and just label them across the top, you can almost stack them like a filing cabinet. So you can flick through.
You're such a neat freak.
I love it.
Yeah,
this is really getting me excited. I love it.
Is there one thing you can leave us with that we wouldn't have thought about, that maybe it's an instant meal that you just defrost, or is there something, a space saver, a money saver, an anti-food waste technique that we may not have thought about?
I mean, I really think that the first place to start is to stick a notepad next to your food bin or wherever you throw away your food and start to write down every time you throw something away, because chances are it could be frozen. And I've got stacks of free resources on social media and wherever, so people can look it up very easily to see if instead of throwing those foods away, could they be putting them in the freezer instead, and then, just cooking with a lot of them straight from frozen. It's just making sure that when you freeze things, you prep them before you freeze them. So don't just stick an onion in the freezer. You need to chop it first.
Fascinating talking to you. Kate is the founder of the Full Freezer. The Full Freezer, and she's a food waste expert.
Thank you very
much
indeed. That's it from us for today. We'll be back soon, and up next it is...
Bev and Andrew, Britain's Newsroom.
Good morning. Good morning. Pressure is growing this morning on the BBC to name the person at the centre of these very sordid allegations. Who knows? We might have something in the next couple of hours.
And definitely happening in our time. The President of the United States is going to meet the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. They've not had a great relationship, and it's tense, not least over NATO, and also the fact that Biden wants to send cluster bombs to Ukraine.
Yeah, really controversial topic. Let us know your thoughts this morning. GB Views at gbnews.com. That and a lot more. Don't go anywhere. The temperature's rising.
Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. We saw lots of showers over the weekend. There will be more to come today. In fact, some longer spells of rain too, and feeling quite fresh. And that's the picture for the next few days as well. Low pressure in charge of our weather, bringing showers and longer spells of rain. It doesn't go anywhere quickly for much of this week, really, keeping it fairly unsettled and cool. And yes, there is some sunshine first thing this morning, particularly across the north and the east, but towards the southwest we've got gathering clouds and outbreaks of rain. This is slowly going to push north and eastwards as we go through the day. Some of this rain could be heavy at times for parts of Wales into the Midlands, northwestern parts of England later as well. Elsewhere will generally be a case of sunshine and showers, and some of them will be heavy at times, possibly thundery too. Best of the sunshine towards the southeast, where we'll see highs approaching the mid-20s, feeling quite chilly under the cloud and rain. Into this evening, that rain pushes northwards and fragments into showers, but then towards the southwest we see further rain pushing into southern counties of England and Wales as we move overnight. Some of this will be heavy as well, and you can see further showers across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England too. So this will keep temperatures up, generally between 14 and 17 Celsius to take us into Tuesday morning. So it's a bit of an unsettled start. We have rain clearing eastwards across England and Wales, showers elsewhere, some of these heavy at times for parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, and then later on Northern England too. Some rumbles of thunder possible. A few glimmers of sunshine in between the showers, and feeling quite fresh, particularly around the west where it will be quite breezy. Temperatures in the high teens to low 20s across the UK, which is a little below average, particularly where we do have that strength of wind. Over the next few days it does stay unsettled, further showers, longer spells of rain, and temperatures generally on the cool side, reaching the low 20s at best towards the south and east.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.